Bertha, a fragile squirrel, was born among lions. Since birth, she lived in her cruel aunt's house. Her only friend was her future husband, the second prince. But after she decided to give it all up for the sake of her dream, he killed her. She woke up in the past, even before meeting the prince. What is most important in such times? That's right, speed. She immediately ran away, slipped into her father's possessions. She is not happy here, but she will go to the end to reveal a terrifying secret, after which she will not be kicked out for anything. She was definitely dying, and she was definitely lying in a pool of her own blood. The girl could never have thought that people whom she considered close would treat her in such a way, but alas, they said goodbye to her without batting an eye. But now for some reason she was in the palace. And her age. She was reborn after death and returned as a young woman, a girl. At that moment, she went to bow to the descendant of the white snake, and she was asked to be very respectful. Finally, they reached their destination, and what was Balachka's surprise when she saw him in front of her? It was Ritter, the first crown prince whom she was going to marry. What is happening here? Why is he here? It was this person who stood then and watched her die, and on his face was the same hideous and mysterious smile as it is now. This is a twist. Higher powers give her a chance to change everything. At the sight of Balachka, the young man smiled even wider and asked the girl if they knew each other. Did he really not recognize her? Did he not recognize the victim he killed? Or is he pretending very well? But she once really loved him. Birdie remembers very well how her mother shouted at her in childhood so that she would not stare at the boy with beautiful blonde hair. After all, this is Crown Prince Ritter himself, but then she didn't care at all. Even the Emperor himself. On the day of their first meeting, they looked like such little children, and now she has returned to the past again to meet her killer once again. Well, let's see what all this is for and what will come of it. The prince saw that the girl was worried, so he tried to calm her down. It is not at all scary that she is not from the family of snakes, but from the lower class of squirrels. They will be good friends, despite all the rules and regulations. Indeed, Ritter treated Bertha with genuine kindness and understanding. For many years, he was not at all interested in the fact that they have a huge difference in status and origin. He liked spending time with the girl and taking care of her, and she believed him. She loved him for many years, until the moment when her dream began to become a reality. Then, everything changed. His attitude became cold, arrogant, and at one point, he simply decided to kill her, biting Bertha's neck. The girl was lonely since childhood. The mother died very early, and she was given to be raised by a harmful and always evil aunt. Bertha's only salvation was books. She read everything in a row to distract herself from the cruelty of the world. Farina Sirius, Bertha's aunt, was an evil and straightforward woman. Maybe she became like this because of a difficult fate, but she was terribly annoyed by the fact that her niece was making a fool of herself, sitting all day reading some book. One morning, a woman appeared in the girl's room and coldly told her to gather. It's time for them to go, although Bertha had no idea where they were going. Usually, no one invited her anywhere. The aunt made an evil smile and said that it was time for her to benefit the family that feeds her and gives her a roof over her head. It turned out that the first prince wants to marry her. And this is great luck. Completely forgetting to ask the girl if she agreed to such an adventure, Farina turned around and ordered Bertha to follow her. Along the way, she reminded that the girl should consider the prince her future husband and serve him with faith and truth. This was followed by continuous moral education. Bertha must always bow before His Majesty. Do not forget to speak carefully and quietly. Monitor the clarity of her speech, and do not dare to contradict her in anything. One got the impression that Bertha was supposed to meet not with a man but with some kind of monster, and this really stressed the girl. After all, the prince is approximately the same age as she, so why so much pathos? Aunt could not calm down. It never occurred to him to ask the girl if she was ready for such a step, and if she needed this prince at all, and she didn't need him. They scared her so much that Bertha imagined not a boy, but a real monster. Farina asked not to forget that this is not just a young man. This is the son of the emperor, and in his veins flows not ordinary blood, but the blood of a white snake. Therefore, once and for all, Bertha must remember that she is of the lower class. All the girl's fears were dispelled when she met Ritter Astrum. The crown prince turned out to be not so scary, but even a very cute boy. He asked Bertha not to worry and to behave as usual. At the beginning of the acquaintance, she was so scared that she did not even think of extending Ritter's hand to shake. He was nothing like the one she had been warned about. And where is the tyrant and haughty heir? The boy himself took the girl's hand and gently stroked it, and then his eyes opened wide. He looked carefully at the mark that was depicted on Bertha's wrist. He saw such a thing for the first time. It was a sign, a special sign, with which the higher powers awarded only the chosen ones. Only the chosen ones of the constellations were born with such a symbol. It was an image of a fragment of a star that was considered magical. Usually, people were proud of the fact that they had a mark on their body from higher powers, but for some reason Bertha was ashamed of her symbol. She always tried to hide it under the sleeve of her clothes, and now the prince saw the image on his wrist. The young man saw the girl's reaction and how she tried to hide her symbol. He smiled and said that her sign is very beautiful, and the girl is not shy about it. At such words, a drop of confidence appeared in Bertha's eyes. Ritter again took the girl's hand and looked directly into her eyes. He asked if she understands that from now on, he will always be on her side and will protect her in any case. But how can such a thing be at all? She is not worthy of such a relationship. From that moment on, the boy with blonde hair became her only friend. She married him and thought that she and the prince would become even closer to each other. But I was wrong. Her world turned upside down and collapsed. Farina reported that the girl would be engaged in a completely different place, and these classes were by no means simple. The woman simply used the lessons to take the girl's life under complete control. Beautiful and expensive clothes, delicious food and exquisite drinks, high society and uninteresting secular conversations. All this was foreign to Bertha. She could not get used to such a life. But everything was not so bad. She found an abandoned attic where many books, interesting magazines, and newspaper clippings were stored, and now, at every convenient opportunity, the girl ran right here to distract herself. And there was one more interesting fact that few people knew about. At the behest of higher powers, Bertha could easily turn into a squirrel. Therefore, she often used this privilege and sneaked into the garden to bask in the sun. Sometimes the prince wondered how she was doing. When he saw a book in her hands, he asked what she was reading, and Bertha read everything in a row. Now I was studying the Book of Laws. After all, in the future the girl dreamed of becoming a trader and seeing the whole world. The girl thought that such a role was perfect for her. She will travel, and the wandering traders have an unwritten rule to sell shame for a handful of coins. As her aunt used to say, it suits Bertha. She had no idea that you could live your whole life in one place. It's pretty boring. You need to see the whole world. This was her cherished dream. Of course, no one supported her idea, but Bertha did not care about others. The worst thing was that Ritter didn't want to listen to Bertha's nonsense at all. She is the future queen. Why does she want to change the most important title in the country to the role of a traveling saleswoman? For a long time, the girl did not know how to talk about this topic with the prince, but one day she decided and simply asked if Ritter wanted to marry her. After all, the emu definitely doesn't like it. It's just what his mother wants. They are just friends, and real friends should help each other, and above all be honest. So maybe they should come up with something to avoid this stupid wedding which neither she nor the prince needs. The prince looked sadly at the girl and smiled. He also dreams about many things, but alas, his dreams are not interesting to anyone. He is of royal blood and must follow all the customs and rules of his family. But how happy Bertha's eyes were when she heard that Ritter was ready to help her make her dreams come true. It turned out that he really is a true friend and understands her like no one else. At least one person in this world wants to help her. One evening, the girl called the prince to her room and told him that she had a plan ready to escape from the imperial palace. She will run away from here and finally fulfill her old dream, become a merchant. Ritter listened carefully to the girl and said that he would help in whatever way he could, as he had promised. But first you need to check everything well and prepare in detail. Everything must be done so that no one suspects that they acted together. In the conversation, the prince called Berta a princess several times, but she is not a princess. She has the status of a duke, but the guy said that this is for now, and let him just trust him, then everything will go well. The girl calmed down a little, and the guys began to develop an escape plan, scrolling through all the possible nuances. There was a lot of work because they had to outsmart the entire guard of the imperial palace. Everything had to be thought through to the smallest detail. How to save money, where to find cheap housing for Bertha, what academy to enter in order to get a good education and spend a minimum of money. When the plan was fully drawn up, it turned out that they would not be able to do much because of their age. It was necessary to wait for the onset of adulthood and only then to implement everything planned. But the wait was worth it. Time passed imperceptibly, and the day came when Bertha turned 18. Ritter appeared in her room. He came to say goodbye to the girl and wish her luck. This is how the girl appeared at first glance, but instead of warm words, I wished for silence. The prince was silent. He leaned close to the girl's neck, and then something terrible happened. He bit her hard. Bertie managed to push the guy away. She was scared, so she asked why he did that, why he bit her. Then the girl looked more closely and saw fangs in the crown prince's mouth instead of teeth. Of course, Ritter did not explain anything, and Bertha felt that her strength was leaving her. Blood flowed down her neck, and the girl could not stand on her feet. She fell to the floor, right in front of the prince standing next to her. Quick steps were heard, and someone entered the room. When the girl raised her head a little, she saw that her aunt was standing next to Ritter. What is she doing here? Why is she whispering to her friend? Bertie gathered her strength and started asking for help. Attention was drawn to her, and after a minute, the prince leaned towards her. But, unfortunately, not for help. He was cold and focused. The next minute, he took her wrist. Then he sharply yanked the girl's arm and pulled back the sleeve to see the symbolic sign. The signum stone was in place and adorned Bertha's wrist. In the next second, he tore it alive from the body of his ex-girlfriend. It was as if the whole life passed before the girl's eyes. Her first meeting with Prince Ritter, their conversations, friendship, and his promise, always and under any circumstances to support her and help her in everything. And now, Berta was lying in a half-passed state on the floor in a pool of blood, and the prince stood nearby, not even paying attention to the girl's torment, giving her the opportunity to die. He was telling her aunt something. But everyone, fortunately, forgot that the girl had a special gift. It can turn into protein. Now is the time to use it for good purposes, just to escape from this terrible place and traitors. Very quickly she got to the market square and boarded a carriage that was going to the north of the empire, to the province of Aslan. She hid upstairs and waited for dispatch. No one would have paid attention to her anyway. This was not how she imagined escaping from the imperial palace. She had a completely different plan, which the girl was developing together with the prince. But what happened, happened, and there is no way back, only forward. She returns to the places where she was born and grew up. The journey will be long. She was left alone, without friends, help, and any thoughts on how to proceed. But she will definitely think about it, and then she will take revenge on the prince. Aunt was furious. She did not expect that her niece could use the power of transformation and run away from them. She shouted after the girl that she would get things done when she returned, and the prince understood that the squirrel was not going to come back. The woman did not calm down because she had completely different plans for her niece. It seemed that she was about to burst with anger. It was embarrassing in front of the prince because she messed up the whole thing. And the prince stood aside and looked at the woman without any emotions. After all, she came up with everything and organized the meeting between Ritter and Berta. And now, because of her, their whole plan is falling apart. Now everything looked exactly as if the woman seized the ideal opportunity for her, leaving the prince with any opportunity to fight for the throne and work towards the ego of his own brother. The woman fell to her knees and began to beg for mercy. What did the prince come up with? She is initially loyal only to him, and there is no malice in her actions. She has been devoted to Ritter for many years. Farina promised the prince that she would fix the situation very quickly. She will not allow evil rumors to spread throughout the capital, and no one will learn about the incident. The prince had little faith in women, but in the current situation, he had no second choice. He asked Firin to settle everything as quickly as possible. Dasha said that he is ready to give access to the crystal layer if necessary. At the time when Auntie and the prince were looking for a way to return Berta in the capital, the girl was already in the north of the country. At that moment, she was standing near the front door of Aslan's central castle. Finally, she got here. Here she will gather her thoughts and of course take cruel revenge on Ritter for his betrayal of her. He is always on guard because of his brother, and if the second prince was still alive, then this chance should be taken. Well, then the girl remembered that by the will of higher forces, she again returned to the past. Hey, he's only 8 years old, so the second prince is still alive. But the problem is that he is always on the battlefield, and finding him will be even more difficult. You need to be very careful. Signum is very rare and expensive. So many will want to steal it. She herself is still very young and weak, and her chances of survival are very small. Therefore, it is worth thinking carefully about each step. One day, the girl eavesdropped on important information for her that the royal army under the command of Duke Aslan defeated the Holy Empire in the first battle. This was great news for the squirrel. If everything continues at this pace, then the Great War, which has lasted for many years, will finally end, and she will be able to find a way to meet the second prince. 10 years ago, the Great War seemed to be coming to an end. Well, the exact opposite happened. There was an event that caused the Imperial Army to flee. This was the first retreat of the Golden Lion, which had always won before that. After this event, the war lasted another 10 long years, entailing many human losses. But everything can change if the second prince learns his future, and Bertie will help him in this. Duke of the Golden Lion. Leonhart Eld. Aslan must know the truth. He was an incredibly smart and brave man. It is not for nothing that his army always won in any of the battles, but the fate of this man was not easy. Although she was a princess, she had no family. She did not know anyone who could be called her father. This man never visited her and did not answer any of her letters. Only once came the usual invitation to visit the duchy. It happened right before the coming-of-age ceremony. Bertie felt like an ordinary abandoned child who was not needed by anyone, but even she had the right to at least something. A bright period in her life should also begin, and now she will try to do everything differently. She was given a second chance, and she tries to visit her father's house, and after the coming-of-age ceremony, he will definitely run away and become a traitor. She went too far in her dreams. Poshemu necessarily becomes an ordinary traitor. After all, she can create her own huge trade association. The whole world should know about her. Bertha did not even doubt that everything should work out for her. It is not for nothing that fate prepares her so many trials. So she deserves to be the best version of herself, because the second chance is given only to the chosen ones. All this, of course, was good, but at this moment the girl, turned into a squirrel, was standing near the door of Aslan's northern castle and was shivering from the cold. Fortunately, the guards noticed her. A peephole was pointed at the girl, and she understood from the reaction of the guards that they were going to approach her now. Probably, they noticed a sign, and it's very bad. It is necessary to quickly escape from here. But it was too late. Bertie heard someone call her and call her mistress. Then she was asked not to run away, and the phrase Princess Aslan sounded again. Hey, I didn't hear it. They called her a princess. One of the soldiers ran up to her and leaned over. The guy raised his helmet and showed a surprised face. Why is she unaccompanied? After all, princesses cannot move alone. This is completely unacceptable. Berta started to explain something to the guard, but he smiled, asked for forgiveness, and said that he did not understand the squirrel's language. And then it dawned on her that she was still in the squirrel's body. The guy carefully lifted her in his arms, trying not to cause pain or discomfort. He said that he would take her inside the castle. You can't freeze the princess in front of the front door. Ego can be punished for this. The first people the girl met inside were the maids. They were all amazed and moved. Then they began to greet the princess in the castle and say that she is ready to serve her at any moment and on any occasion. But their joyous shouts suddenly stopped because the maids saw Joanna. This was the main housekeeper. In appearance, the woman seemed very serious and impregnable. But in the next second, the chief servant leaned over Berta to get a better look at her. Joanna broke into a smile of emotion and said that the princess had lost a lot of weight, but she will make sure that everything is back to normal. After a few minutes, the girl was seated at the table, on which mountains of goodies rose. The woman said that if the squirrel needed a supplement, she would arrange everything in an instant, just so that the princess would get better. Since Berta had been in the car for a long time, she was very hungry, and now delicious dishes were very convenient. She ate everything that was brought for her from the kitchen, and then washed it down with delicious drinks. But why are they treating her so well here? And again the image of Ritter appeared before Berta's eyes. She remembered that no one can be trusted. Sometimes kindness brings terrible consequences. The prince also treated her very well, but as a result he killed her. If people show you too much kindness and attention, then they definitely have ulterior motives, and they will definitely use them to offend Berta. Learned this rule a long time ago. Therefore, the girl called Joanna over and said that she needed to tell the head of personnel something. It was necessary to feel the soil and understand what is really happening here. The woman immediately approached Berta, said that the girl can call her simply Joanna, and she is ready to fulfill any request. The woman thought that Bertha had a proposal for the hostess. Not knowing what the girl was actually talking about, Joanna said that the hostess was not at home. He left for the battlefield again and did not tell when he would return, but she will be able to convey everything to him. He wrote a note. But when their master learns that the squirrel has finally returned home, he will surely hurry to deal with all the enemies in order to return home as soon as possible and see her. After all, her father loves her very much. In the meantime, the girl can rest and gain strength. But there was no time for rest, Berta asked. There is no main master who fulfills his duties in the estate. It was necessary to prevent a military defeat. Before Joanna could answer the squirrel's question, the door suddenly opened and a young guy appeared on the threshold. It was the deputy master, Carlis Aslan. The guy's facial expression was slightly nervous. But when he came closer and took a better look at the girl, Carlis smiled. He greeted her and said that they had been waiting for the escaped squirrel for a long time, and finally she returned. But what would happen next? The girl had no idea. The situation looked as if the squirrel had escaped on purpose. Everyone was looking for her, worried about her life and health, but finally she returned by herself. Probably, she created a lot of problems because of this. Joanna ran to intercede for the girl. The woman asked not to offend the poor girl. Vita is still very small. Then she asked the Duke why he was covered in blood and began to put his ego in order. Bertha had not yet been to the Duke's estate, but now she perfectly understood who was standing in front of her. She had seen his portrait before. It was Carlis Aslan, the same person the whole country is talking about. He was an incredible guy. It seemed he was born a warrior. He started wielding a sword flawlessly at the age of 10. There were and are no equals to him in this matter, and everyone says that the battlefield became his second home a long time ago. His enemies never knew mercy. He has no equal in military affairs. Because of his hair, the color of dark blood, the inhabitants of the empire called him the King of Lviv. The girl has more than once heard different stories about ego exploits. Finally, it dawned on the girl that the guy standing in front of her, who is considered a hero of all times and nations, is her brother. That's right, she didn't expect to see him here. Carlis came even closer and sniffed. Strange thing, the guy clearly identified the smell of snakes. But why does she emit such a smell? After all, this is not characteristic of proteins. So something happened to his sister. If my brother knew what happened to Berta a few weeks ago, then everything would be clear to him. She was overcome by people whom she completely trusted. These people are vile sales snakes, but she will take revenge on them soon. It seemed that absolutely nothing could be hidden from this guy. He sees through people and from the first time distinguishes between truth and lies. It was dangerous to look into his eyes. She has such a wonderful brother. For the first time in a long time, Berta felt that she was in a safe place. But such a terrible and strong Carlis was filled with warmth and pacification. It was as if she was under a warm, weightless blanket. Usually, everyone was afraid of the young Duke. Ego's bright yellow eyes in the series make people fear and panic. But Berta looked at the guy with a smile and affection, and he was surprised in return. Has there really been a man who is not afraid of him? At the next moment, Carlos bent down and took the girl in his arms. He hugged her tightly and held her like that for several minutes. As it turned out, then he gave her his smell, the one that the entire Aslan family should smell like. The fact is that no one has ever hugged Berta, and it was at this moment that she was frightened by the fact that she did not know how to react to such behavior of her brother. Yes, and why does he do it? At first, she thought that the guy hated her. Seeing that the girl was frightened, the Duke put her on the ground, and Joanna started scolding the guy for scaring the squirrel with his actions. She just returned home. She needs to recover. The woman reminded that this girl is his sister, and he should take care of her or just treat her carefully, but the young man replied that it doesn't matter. She's just an escaped squirrel. And the Duke was absolutely right. He reminded Joanna that this girl doesn't even have a name, but he is not going to offend her. He is not interested in women and small children because he is a warrior. War is his calling. The guy's words were pure and true. Indeed, the girl did not have a name until she was 10 years old. No one took her for the Duke's daughter. She was a dirty blood, and even the servants treated her with contempt. The maid was treated this way because they took the example of the vicar auntie always called Berta, the adoptive half-breed. They were black, and royal beastmen are famous for their golden eyes. Ritter had the eyes of a snake. Their shade was yellowish. At Carlis, they were bright yellow, which testified that the boy belonged to the family of Lviv. The brighter the blood of the animal, the brighter the shade of gold in the eyes. Rod Aslanov has always been famous for the pure shade of gold in his eyes, but as it turned out, she also belongs to this glorious family. But why then do her eyes have a completely different color? What is the reason? This should be known. This is the clear reason why even the servants called her a mudblood. She has a different eye color, but this is not the time to talk about it. Someday she will figure it out, and she has a name, so everything is not so bad. She remembers her name and will not allow anyone to call her half-blood anymore. She shouted, drawing Carlos and Joanna's attention. The girl said in a firm voice that she has a name. Her name is Berta. It seemed to her that after she called her name, the young Duke froze for a second. It was impossible to understand how he perceived this information. Maybe it was better not to talk about it. Joanna smiled and said that the name is very beautiful and suits the girl. Then I wondered if Bertie came up with the ego herself, but she answered that her father called her that, and it means blessing. The young Duke thought for a moment, and then said that he would call his little sister a tail, but this is not the same name. After all, tails are the distinguishing feature of their genus. The girl playfully puffed her lips, portraying both. And now she looked more like a little angry chipmunk than a squirrel, but the guy just smiled. He didn't care how his sister would react to his words. Joanna decided to diffuse the situation and intervene in the conversation. Otherwise, there might be a scandal. Carlos is a short-tempered person. Therefore, the woman asked if the girl wanted to see her father. The main maid reported that the mistress was not there now, but she can meet with the administrator who deals with all the affairs of the duchy. Maybe they will have something to talk about. Joanna went in search of the manager, and then Berta panicked. After all, the woman left her alone with Carlos. And what are they talking about with this self-confident guy? Although he is her brother, he behaves very strangely. Of course, the maids overheard the conversation in the room and were happy that the squirrel had already been given a name. But the housekeeper told them not to rejoice in vain. If you give a child an inappropriate name, his fate can change. For example, the character will not fit. It is so serious that the body can begin to break down. The most harmless thing that can happen is that the child will be constantly haunted by misfortune. According to Northern traditions, it often happens that parents give their child a name only after a few years after his birth. Then at least some rudiments of a personality appear, and it is possible to choose a name accurately. This is especially true of long-awaited children who are born in love and with the consent of both parents. Then choosing a name can take much more time. After all, a lot depends on the name of the child. Joanna said that she didn't even notice that she hadn't started calling the girl by her name. For her, she continued to be a squirrel. You need to learn to call yourself Little Mrs. Bertha, once they gave her such a name. Meanwhile, Carlos openly looked at his fugitive sister. She had beautiful hair, bright and fluffy, but she was not as tall as his tail. Quite a sketch. He overheard the conversation of the maids in the corridor. Everyone saw Bertha in the guise of a squirrel. It turned out that he was the only one who did not see her transformation, and I would really like to see this process. The guy decided not to wait for an opportunity to present itself, so he decided to directly ask, or rather order the girl, to turn into a squirrel right away. He just has to see it. What kind of proposal is this? Why should she demonstrate to her brother how she turns into a squirrel? And why does he even ask her for such a thing? What kind of bullying is this over the younger sister? Strangely enough, the young Duke saw that the girl was beginning to worry. It seemed to him that he did not ask for anything bad, but on the other hand, the sister did not resist and did not even try to run away. Since early childhood, the aura of a predator has awakened in Carlos's body. Therefore, all small animals instinctively ran away from him, trying to save their lives. Over the years, this aura has only strengthened, but for some reason she did not act on this little one. She, in turn, looked at her brother with wide-open eyes and tried to calm down. In her past life, only her father ignored her. The brother has not done anything bad to her, so there is no point in being afraid of him. Unlike her, he is a strong and brave animal. The brother is the pride of the family and the favorite of the public, and he earned all this not thanks to his title and father, but only thanks to his mind and endurance. Friendship with such a person will definitely not hurt her. On the contrary, her brother will become a reliable protection for her. Therefore, without thinking for a long time, Birdie turned into a small, soft, and fluffy animal. The young Duke was surprised, and then broke into a smile. This little animal touched him, and he tried to find something in common between the lion and the squirrel. Carlos decided that they had similar ears. The squirrel looked at him and tried to understand the emotions the young Duke was feeling at that moment. He was very wrong about the ears. In a lion and in a squirrel, they are completely different. But if it is convenient for him to think like that, then let them be similar. Carlos watched the squirrel a little longer, and then ordered his guard to bring some seeds. She is so thin, let her eat. Then he took one grain in his palm and handed it to Berta. How pleased she was that her brother decided to take care of her. The little girl quickly jumped into the boy's hands and began to eat her favorite treat. The chance that they would become friends increased by the minute. And the young Duke did not take his eyes off the cute little animal. How funny she is! Why did the squirrel wander around the world for so long? I wonder where she has been and what was her life until today. Carlos caught himself thinking that a strange and unknown feeling had appeared in his soul. It was as if an invisible warmth enveloped his whole body, and he wanted to smile all the time. Is this squirrel doing that with him? But his thoughts were interrupted by Joanna. The woman said that the master was calling them, but how? Ego was not in the castle. How did he manage to return so quickly? She is not yet ready for such an important meeting. She needs to gather her thoughts. And then a terrible thought came to Berta's head. Probably, her father wants to see her so that she can be kicked out of the palace right now. He never showed love to his daughter. Moreover, he did not even seek a meeting with her for many years. The servant manager carefully looked at the Duke and the squirrel. She said that she is very glad that brother and sister were able to become friends in such a short time, and it was pure truth. Then Joanna fell silent for a while, collecting her thoughts. She did not know how to delicately ask the squirrel to turn into a cute little girl again. She cannot appear before her father in the form of an animal. When the maid took the girl to her room to change into better clothes, the Duke began to question his guard about how the squirrel got into the castle. He replied that he found her at the central gate. She froze and wanted to get inside. For some reason, the baby never left the young man's mind. Her fur was so soft and fluffy, and when she turned into a girl, she became even cuter. And most importantly, she is not afraid of him at all. Obviously, Carlis really liked the role of the older brother. He had never had to hold small animals in his hands, but they ran away from him, saving their lives. But this squirrel feels his energy and is not afraid at all. Half an hour later, Joanna and the baby returned to the young Duke. Together they went to the door behind which was the hostess's office. The atmosphere was quite tense. Berta did not know what was waiting for her. But everything happened wrong. As the girl imagined herself, father was not in the office. Instead of him, a pleasant young man stood at the table and smiled at the guests. Joanna forgot to say that they are not going to the hostess, but to the manager. He was a nice-looking guy. His name was Count Jalot, and he was Master Aslan's right-hand man. The manager got up from the table and bowed to the girl. He was also glad to meet her. The girl smiled and also introduced herself, saying that her name was Bertie, and this name was given to her by her father, but they told her that the Pope wanted to see her. But it turned out that this was not the case at all, but she doesn't mind talking a little with the manager. The man thought a little, then answered that the master asked to notify him immediately after the girl appeared in the palace. For this, the manager uses a magical crystal layer. It turned out that with the help of this magic ball, which was a kind of communicator, you can communicate in real time. The Duke is now at war, but he will talk to his daughter without any problems, even at a distance. There are, of course, some nuances. For example, if a fierce battle is going on now, it will be extremely difficult for her father to get in touch. The North is now in the middle of a fierce war with an enemy nation. The girl wanted to shout loudly that she is here precisely because she wants to prevent this cursed protracted bloodshed, but she did not decide because she did not know how those present would react. The manager tried to connect Berta with her father with the help of a ball, but nothing happened. The man apologized and suggested that now the owner is in the very center of military operations. The Duke was so busy that he simply sent his daughter to the capital and forgot about her for many years. Probably he did not expect that the girl would decide to return to her native home, where she was not expected at all. He can even get angry. Carlis did not take his eyes off the girl. She looked so sad and broken that the guy wanted to take her in his arms, hug her tightly and calm her down. Tears glistened in Berta's eyes, but she tried to hold them back. Bertie remembered her aunt, the actress, who only did what she scolded, and scolded the girl for any reason. She didn't even hide that she hated her niece, but she was small and could not change anything. With a smile on his face, the manager of affairs of the duchy told Berta that she would have to wait a little. When the war ends, she will definitely see and talk to her father. But then Carlis intervened in their conversation, and his facial expression showed that the guy was very angry. He approached the man and reminded him that he was only following orders, but let him not meddle in family matters. The manager was a little confused, and a minute later he froze in his bow. He apologized that it was not his business and that he might have offended the girl, but then some strange sounds were heard from the sphere. Count Jalot apologized once more and approached the communication device. It was clear that someone was giving instructions to the man at the end of the call, and the manager promised to do everything right this minute. Then the zealot turned to the girl and said that His Majesty had gotten in touch and wanted to talk to Bertha. Using the layer is not difficult at all. You just need to come up and put your hands on it. The girl immediately followed all the man's instructions and looked forward to hearing her father's voice. And then he was heard right out of nowhere, right above his head. The Duke asked why she had returned to the north. She had never heard her father's voice, but now she knew for sure that it was he who was talking to her, a man to whom a whole army, thousands of people obey. He again asked what happened in the capital. Why did she run away? Well, what could she answer such a question? What will she do? She cannot tell that she died from the hands of the prince, rather from his teeth. How to tell her that it was because of him that she turned into a squirrel and ran away from the castle? From her point of view, she exposed a terrible traitor and also saved her life. But for all other family members, she is a disgrace to the entire Aslan family, and she will not be able to explain everything in such a way that they would believe her. Leonhardt, the head of the Aslan clan, asked not to hide anything and to tell the whole truth, and then Berta thought, and suddenly the father knows the whole truth, and now he is just checking it for honesty. So it's not worth lying. And the girl told her father how her aunt mocked her all this time, and then tried to marry her off to the first Prince Ritter. She arranged a meeting between the prince and Berta. Such a sight. At first, the prince and the girl became friends and got along well. He even promised to protect her in any circumstances, but then something went wrong. He began to act together with his aunt behind her back. Bertha decided not to tell the whole truth. They still won't believe it. Therefore, she simply said that she was afraid that she would really be married off, even without her father's consent, and fled to the north to ask the Duke for protection. Leonhardt, to the girl's surprise, supported her. He said that he would not allow himself to marry a prince without his will. The man was very angry with his sister, who acted without informing him. But then it was worse. Duke Aslan said that while he is away at war, there will be no opportunity to see each other. He cannot leave the battlefield and let Bertie return to the capital and fear nothing. He won't let her down. The girl learned that heavy battles are taking place behind the high mountains of the north. Therefore, the supply of food and weapons there is very complicated. The army is holding on with its last strength and is constantly asking for help. She listened attentively and then decided to admit that she had come here to help her father win the war as soon as possible with the least losses. But no one listened to her. What can a child understand about war? Carlis watched as the squirrel's tail, which stuck out from under the hem of the dress, twitched nervously. He understood that the girl was worried, and for some reason this excitement was transmitted to him. He must intervene to help the little one. And he couldn't stand it. He came up and also put his hand on the layer. Then, in a calm tone, he asked his father what he had said to Balochka. He replied that he wanted her to calmly return to the capital and not return to his orders. The guy perfectly understood that it was not safe for his sister to stay in the north, but first he must ask Balochka if she wants to live in the palace of Duke Leonhardt Aslan, and she answered that she would be happy to stay. The Duke overheard the conversation between the brother and sister, and he was dissatisfied with what he heard, but his son calmed him down. He will definitely be able to protect his little sister from enemies. In addition, there is a lot of security in the palace, but Leonhardt was not so confident. He suggested that their castle might be on the front line. How then will they be able to protect their people and Balochka in particular? There is nothing more dangerous than blind self-confidence. The Duke's voice was confident, and his order could not be discussed. He decided that his daughter should be in a safe place, and that is precisely the capital. The enemy's army will definitely not be able to get there. But the brother and sister still decided to try their luck. Carlis tried to persuade his father. For some reason, he really wanted this little brave girl to stay in her home. She was very nice. The guy was a warrior, and all means are good for war. Therefore, Carlis decided to cheat. He told his father that the girl had lost weight and was in a bad condition. He is not sure that she will be able to reach the capital at all. It was clear that Leonhardt thought a little, yes, he really hasn't seen his daughter for many years and has absolutely no idea what his baby looks like now, but Carlis is with her now and he better know what's with Berta. Maybe the young Duke is right. The girl has really come a long way, probably. Such a journey has exhausted her. In addition, she will be all alone in the capital. He will not give her back to the Vicomtesse. There was an uncomfortable pause, after which the girl nevertheless heard from her father that he allowed her to stay. She will live in her parents' palace until Leonhardt returns home from the war. Now she should thank her brother from the bottom of her heart. If it were not for his mournful words, then the Duke would definitely send her back to the capital, and the hated Ritter is waiting for her there. But Carlis did not want to listen to anything. As a sign of gratitude, he asked the girl to touch her fluffy red tail. He is so cute. Bertha was surprised she could not think of such a strange request. Finally, the guy managed to touch his sister's fluffy tail. He was so gentle and soft that the Duke did not want to remove his hand. The security guard didn't lie. The squirrel's fur is truly magnificent. Bertha could not say that her brother's actions brought her great pleasure. She was afraid that the boy, like all boys, would start pulling her favorite ponytail. It would be better if he asked to touch her pigtails. Suddenly, Joanna ran into the room screaming. The woman reported that a fire had started in the palace. The warehouse in the left wing caught fire, and most of the building was also engulfed in flames. panic all around. The young Duke reacted instantly. He knew very well that it was there that most of the spare ammunition for the army was located, and if the fire reaches there, the army will surely be without weapons. What will he say to his father? When the boy finally ran to the place of the fire, he saw a continuous fire that consumed more and more territory. He was not confused and immediately began to command. A lot of water was needed. Carlos himself did not understand how he managed to organize the supply of water to the place of the fire so quickly. Probably military conditioning and stress tolerance worked. All the inhabitants of the castle came to help. Only one squirrel stood aside and could not even move. She understood that this was the first news about the retreat. Events are repeated. Everything happens in the same way as in the past life. The girl knew that after this terrible incident, they would lose most of the weapons and food for the army. The troops will have to retreat, and the Duke will not be able to finish this war. She had already seen all these events in her past life. Many then did not understand the reason for the first retreat of the army. Duke Leonhardt then became a national laughingstock. From the golden lion, he turned into a wet kitten. The girl also knew that her father did not reveal the details of those events. He did not want to tarnish the royal honor. The first reason was a fire, then the lack of food for the soldiers, and next year a huge disaster will happen. The army of the Kingdom of Aslan will lose a huge number of soldiers in this catastrophe. This will be almost half of the composition, and the Duchy of Aslan will suffer huge losses. Bertha understood that she needed to prevent all this at all costs. To prevent all subsequent troubles, it is logical to stop the very first trouble. That's what the girl thought and decided that she would not allow the first retreat of Aslan's army, no matter what it is within her power. She just needs to try. Carlos went somewhere, and after a while the girl found out that he turned into a lion and went in search of the one who set fire to the building with provisions for the army. 2 hours later, the criminal was already caught and brought to the palace. It is worth noting that Berta saw her brother in such a way for the first time, and what she observed, she liked more and more. In this form, Carlos was even more formidable and self-confident. But it was not long to watch the boy lion. After a few minutes, he turned back into a beautiful young man with an amazing torso. Probably, he deliberately forgot to put on a shirt. As it turned out, the criminal was already dead. The guards asked if the master had killed this traitor, but Carlos calmly answered that this person committed suicide. Probably he was afraid of punishment for what he had done. The young Duke came closer to the lying corpse and carefully looked at his hand. A sign was visible on the outside of the palm. The guy took a closer look. This was an image of the mark of the Holy Empire. But something did not agree in the guy's conclusions. A criminal cannot walk near the warehouses that he set fire to, even if he does not gather in person and hide. Yes, and he has a label in a very visible place. This is some kind of trap or deception. The Duke thought he is not used to taking everyone's word for it. You need to check everything thoroughly. Everything can't be so easy and obvious. Someone is trying to circle the ego around the finger, but Carlos is not one of the weaklings. A man who was in charge of provisions for Aslan's army approached the boy. He was confused. Tomorrow they had to send wagons with food and weapons to the battlefield. But what to do now? Nothing will be sent. Count Gillot appeared out of nowhere. He was slightly saddened and said that it was his fault that he could not foresee the fire. Duke Leonhardt appointed him manager, but he could not live up to the owner's trust. But Carlos calmed him down. There are no guilty parties here. No one could have predicted such a turn of events. The fire was planned by someone from the enemy, but still, probably, there is a traitor in their house who helped the criminal. But the manager was completely upset. He asked for forgiveness again. He had to better monitor the situation in the palace. Now, because of him, the army will be left without provisions, and this will lead to defeat in battle. Carlos could not get rid of the habit of suspecting everyone and everything. It seemed strange to him that the manager ran to them on the street. And what is even more strange is that for some reason he wants to put the blame on himself. Bertie stood for a long time and watched what was happening from the side, but finally she decided to intervene. She asked to be heard because she has something to say. But Carlos smiled and called her tales. and why, looking at the naked torso of the young Duke, she could not express her thoughts clearly. It was very annoying. And it was also annoying that this impudent guy allows himself to call her tales in front of strangers. In the next second, the girl decided that now was not the time for both. It is necessary to save the situation, and in particular the army of Duke Aslan. Therefore, she handed the men a handful of large red berries. Carlis took one of the berries from her, but everyone knew that this plant is very poisonous. Ego was called scary, and it came exactly from hell. The berries had paralytic properties, so no one even touched them. The Duke carefully tried to take the berries from the girl, but she refused. Berta said that she had already thought of everything, and these berries could really help them. Well, why don't they want to listen to her for a minute? Count Jello again froze in his bow and allowed himself to remind the girl that now was not the time for such amusements. These are ordinary poisonous berries. They cannot feed the whole army of the Duke. Finally, Carlis couldn't stand it and ordered everyone to shut up, and the girl said that the plant can grow in any conditions. Both leaves and fruits are edible, and one such berry can feed 2 warriors. The manager tried to be calm, but it turned out very poorly. He again tried to explain to this little girl that the plant is completely poisonous and will cause many problems with the soldiers' health. If the warriors eat even a few of these berries, their stomachs will simply burn from the poison, and then the enemy army will easily capture the positions of Aslan's army. How these berries will help? They will only harm. Everyone around began to whisper, "What did this little girl come up with? She wants to destroy her father's army and then put the whole country in danger." After all, everyone knew that tuberculosis causes diarrhea and spasms. The girl was tired of listening to this nonsense for the 100th time. Therefore, she asked everyone to pay attention to her. The next minute, she opened her mouth, bit off a huge piece of berry, and swallowed it. Everyone's mouths fell open in horror and surprise. This girl is definitely abnormal. They already have a lot of problems, and here she is with her inventions. Now it will be necessary to call the doctors and do gastric lavage as a matter of urgency. The doctor appeared immediately at the behest of the young master. What a stupid ego, sister! Stupid and stubborn. But the doctor examined the girl and said that she was absolutely healthy and there were no signs of poisoning. The Duke was furious. Well, that can't be, because the tuberosum berries are very dangerous. Why doesn't Kvostik get an upset stomach? Maybe this doctor is bad and doesn't understand diseases. The plant is definitely poisonous, but why does the poison not work on Balachka? Maybe these animals have a second digestion, and what is dangerous for humans is quite normal for squirrels. He explained that he did not find the others. And maybe there are varieties of these berries and some of them can be eaten. Then the girl learned to distinguish poisonous and non-poisonous types of tuberose, and he considered her stupid some time ago. Another of the guards suggested that the girl might have some magical abilities. Maybe she's a witch. After all, everyone from the Aslan family can turn into a lion, and she into a squirrel. The girl decided not to hesitate and explained to the men why she was not poisoned. It turned out that it was all about the stems. Their juice contains an antidote that neutralizes the poison from the berries. So here is the reason. Until that time, everyone thought that the plant was completely poisonous, but only the fruits were eaten. But if the berries are consumed together with the stems, poisoning will not occur. Before coming here, the girl chewed several stems. The liquid worked, so after she swallowed the berry itself, nothing special or terrible happened. She was not poisoned. Bertha knew that this fact with the stems of tuberose berries would be revealed only in a few years. One of the criminals in the future will simply eat the whole plant and not die from severe indigestion. Since the guards were afraid of testing the effect of the plant on themselves, the young owner had to do it. Therefore, Carlis took one plant and ate the berry along with the stem. Everyone froze in anticipation. Enough time passed, but nothing happened to the young master. He still felt excellent, and only then the guards decided to try the berries as well. Everyone was happy. The guards not only satisfied their curiosity, but also ate well, and all thanks to the little squirrel, she solved a big problem. Now the army will not feel hunger. Bertha knew that in this way she would be able to prevent the first retreat of Aslan's army. If we are lucky, the war will not drag on for another 10 long years. She must take advantage of this fact. Everyone praised the girl, complimented her, such a small one, but already so smart. But only the manager stood aside without a mood. The problem is solved, and how can I report it now? Meanwhile, the soldiers were already suffering from a lack of provisions. Famine was about to begin. What kind of battle can we talk about if everyone only thinks about food? But then the assistant commander reported that he saw a wagon with provisions. Leonhardt came out of his tent to assess how many provisions and weapons he had sent from the city of Karlis, but a guard was already waiting for him, who held out a man's letter. Beloshka wrote it to his father. In the letter, the girl was interested in how he was doing, whether he was healthy, whether his soldiers were healthy. Then she said that everything is fine with her and that there is very good news for him, which will significantly affect the course of the war. Meanwhile, the soldiers began to unload provisions. It turned out that the boxes contained poisonous berries. But why were so many of them sent? Maybe they mixed up the wagons, or there was some kind of mistake. But in the accompanying letter, it was clearly written that Bertie was handing over tuberose plants to the soldiers. It is strange why the Duke's daughter is writing to them. This girl is only 8 years old. She may not understand all the consequences. The soldiers did not expect such provisions. Everyone was very hungry, but no one dared to eat poisonous berries, so that in a day they would die of terrible diarrhea. What is this girl doing, and does the Duke know about it? Leonhardt came out into the yard. He saw that his soldiers were standing in confusion and looking at the berries. Well, her own daughter can't wish him to die. Therefore, the man took one berry with a stem and ate it. In this way, Leonhardt showed that tuberosum berries are quite suitable for food. The soldiers, without thinking for a long time, followed the example of their commander and reached for the fruits. They were too hungry. The soldiers were able to satisfy their hunger. Now you can follow your commander into battle. How wise and brave he is. They are ready to follow Leonhardt into fire and water because they love their master and trust him. But the Duke of the North understood very well that the grateful soldiers should not be to him, but to a little girl named Bertha, his daughter. It was she who prevented a great calamity and saved them from starvation. Ego Beloshka learned to write so beautifully and to logically express her thoughts. She was smart beyond her years. And that's good. Someone must have brains, but most soldiers have only muscles. Did Duke Aslan feel remorse for not paying attention to his daughter for so much time? Yes, he was sorry, but I couldn't do it any other way. He was supposed to rule the north and protect the borders of the empire. But it is necessary to go back a few days, exactly to the day when the young princess wrote a letter to her father. She didn't even know if the Duke would read her letter, but she could not take advantage of the chance. She checked the text of the letter once more. The father must not think that she is illiterate, but everything was great. Duke Leonhardt would have read the news from her. She would be so happy. Just in case, she had Joanne read the text. The woman was surprised that the girl's handwriting is very mature and she writes very competently. If the woman did not know, she would have thought that the girl had graduated from the academy. And the housekeeper said that the young Duke had formed a group of volunteers, and they had already gone to collect tuberose plants for Leonhardt's army. The provision will be sent in a day. Bertha was extremely glad that she finally managed to help her father and his army. But this is not enough. There is still a lot of work ahead. Everything is just beginning. Now she wants to go and help volunteers. But then, behind her back, the girl heard the commanding and calm voice of her brother. He asked where this picture was going. The tail is too small to help collect tuberous plants. The guy reminded her that it was long past time for bed, and she is too weak after the journey to the north, and he promised his father that he would take care of her. Therefore, she will not go anywhere, but will eat well and go to bed. Joanna supported the young Duke. The girl really needs to rest. Besides, the maids had already prepared her room. The girl was surprised that she would even have a separate room. Her father did not love her at all, rather even hated her. So why did he make sure that she was allocated a separate room? Or it is not Duke Leonhardt at all, but someone else is worried about her comfortable stay here. It was also strange that Karlis volunteered to take the girl to her new room, although Joanna could have done it with ease. Okay, you'll have to put up with some weird jokes on your side. The woman was very happy that the brother and sister were able to become friends. Few people can communicate normally with this guy, and all because of his charisma and complex character, but the little fluffy squirrel melted his heart. Strangely, Carlos was apparently very domineering and impregnable, but for Balachka, he even held a big heavy door so that it wouldn't hit. And how can you even understand why he behaves like that with her? Yes, she would not have opened such a door on her own. She has too little strength, and her legs are also very short. The girl almost burst into tears on the spot. The guy even felt a little sorry for her, so small and weak. Probably it is impossible to compare her with herself. He is a big and strong lion, the same fragile little squirrel with a fluffy, insanely beautiful tail. Carlos never thought that he would have to take care of a baby. Finally, they entered the room. But compared to the size of the girl, it seemed to her that this was not a room, but a whole huge apartment. Here you can simply get lost in the midst of all this beauty. It turned out that her room has a separate dressing room, a toy room, a small office for busy people, and a huge balcony. Then they came to another huge door. Behind her was her bedroom. The girl thought that she was probably being tested for greed, but she doesn't need any of that pathos, and wealth never attracted her. Therefore, Berta felt a little uneasy. Why so much attention to her? She explained to her brother that she did not need all this. An ordinary little room like a servant's would be enough. She would live there quietly and would not cause problems for anyone. Bertha did not come here for wealth. I need a father. The guy called his sister to him and pointed to the end of the corridor. The territory of her room ended there, and the girl thought that almost an entire floor had been set aside for her. Here is the reception that worked. The young duke took pity on the girl, bent down and picked her up in his arms. She is already tired of running around the house with him. Let him rest a little, but it seems that the sister did not like it. She was a little scared. But Berta was not really afraid. She was just shy. She was embarrassed by the fact that they treat her with such warmth and care. And the girl began to say that she is heavy, so the brother will get up. It seemed that Carlos did not even listen to her words. He continued to carry the girl in his arms around her apartment. In the end, he said that the baby had worked very hard today, so she should have a good rest, and took her to the bedroom. For some reason, the girl remembered her previous room. It served her as a bedroom, kitchen, and living room. Of the furniture, there was only a table, a dresser, a chair, and a narrow bed. And now one bed is more than everything in her former home. But the most beautiful thing in this bedroom was the balcony. It offered a stunning view of a small, beautiful lake surrounded by bushes and trees. Probably, this will be her favorite place of rest. If she hadn't gathered courage and run away from the capital, she probably wouldn't have seen such beauty. In the big city, even in the garden of the imperial palace, there was no landscape more beautiful than this one. She thought that if she tried very hard, she would be able to stay in this house until adulthood. He will be able to admire these landscapes, enjoy the cool weather, and be closer to his father. Carlos carefully put the girl to bed, not forgetting to call her a tailed cutie and cause her a fit of anger. Then the guy wished good night and said, in case of anything, contact him. But how can one go to bed if the sun has not yet set over the horizon, or the inhabitants of the north are used to going to bed early? But the guy replied that she was tired during the day and should gather strength. It seemed that the Duke enjoyed teasing this little one. Therefore, he surmised aloud that it was extremely difficult for little Balachka to reach the north on such short legs. She wanted to be angry with Carlos, but for some reason she couldn't do it. He was too kind to her. No one has ever treated her with such trepidation. Therefore, she simply puffed her lips and answered that she came here in a carriage. When will he get tired of making fun of her? She didn't do anything wrong. She just returned to her parents' home, closer to her father. Maybe he is jealous of her for her father. You can't just be so harmful for no reason. Joanna suddenly appeared on the threshold of the bedroom. She apologized for disturbing the conversation between her brother and sister, but the maids have come and are waiting when it will be possible to prepare the little lady for bed. What the woman saw surprised her very much. The young master was playing with the squirrel, and a sweet smile played on his face. She had never seen him so calm and peaceful. Carlos seemed happy. But the same could not be said about the squirrel. She looked confused and slightly angry. Why should she turn into a furry animal at the first order of this abnormal Carlos? She is not a toy, and he wanted to play with her. Just stay together and make sure that this little squirrel likes everything. Carlos brought a mountain of toys, sweets, and clothes. His eyes shone with joy. Joanna was also happy and asked Balochka if she liked playing with the young master. After all, he is so happy that he can spend time with her. She changed Carlos, made him happier. I wanted to burst out of anger and resentment because no one understood the squirrel's tongue. She just wants to explain that she doesn't like all these games and entertainment. She just wants a normal attitude towards herself. The girl was helped to put on pajamas and prepare for bed. Judging by the nightdress, it cost a lot of money. She did not understand why she should sleep in such expensive things. So the Duchy of Aslan is much richer than she thought. Before going to sleep, Berta wanted a drink of water and left the bedroom in search of a cup and a decanter. But as it turned out, the young master was still here. Why doesn't he leave? What is waiting for? She asked her brother if he wanted to sleep. He examined the girl from head to toe and said that he had decided to stay here before Balochka fell asleep, so that no one would disturb her sleep, and he asks her not to communicate in such an official tone. He is her brother. Carlos found water and gave the baby a drink. Then he picked her up again and carried her to bed. She became shy again. Why does he care about her so much? After all, she can easily get into bed herself. He once again wished the girl a good night and offered to tell her a bedtime story, but Balochka pouted for some reason and refused. Then the guy decided to just sit in her bed until she fell asleep. What is happening at all? At first he seemed so formidable and impregnable, dared and called names, but now, for the first time, he called her by her name and not by a small tail. And how does she feel about him now? While Squirrel was sleeping in bed, in the other wing of the palace Count Gelot was raging with anger. And how did this little fly, unknown to anyone until now, the squirrel was able to prevent him from carrying out his plan? He prepared everything for so long, planned every step, provided for all the nuances. And here is the trouble. This ugly little girl appeared, which pokes its squirrel nose where it shouldn't be. Now he needs to explain everything to customers. The magic layer signaled that they wanted to contact him. Well, why exactly now? What will he say to the lady? How will he explain that their plan has failed? But there is nothing to do. You will have to get in touch and come up with something. The second Queen Astrum was not in the mood. She is not used to waiting for a long time, and this abnormal managing zealot allows himself not to get in touch. How to understand it? What does this fool allow himself? How did this traitor dare not get in touch at the agreed time? She was waiting for good news from him, but for some reason she suspected that Zealot did not have them. He is just a mean coward. She called the executive teacher to her. After all, it was she who allowed the girl to escape to the north to her father. Let him now solve these terrible problems. Viscountess Sirius must not repeat her mistake, and Mrs. Sirius perfectly understood that the Queen rarely jokes. Now the situation is extremely complicated. It is necessary to try to fix everything, otherwise Her Majesty will order to deal with her in a matter of minutes. Berta's morning began with the beautiful singing of birds outside her bedroom window. Never before had she paid attention to how beautifully chirping sparrows were, how beautiful the sunrise was. This is the real magic of nature. After some time, the maid knocked on the room. The girl asked how Balochka slept in the new place and whether she was all right, and then she offered to choose a dress that she would wear today. As far as the girl remembered, she had only one dress, the one in which she got to the northern castle, but after a few minutes she realized that she now has a whole wardrobe with dozens of beautiful dresses. When Berta came out of the dressing room, the maids were simply delighted by the beauty of this girl. She was so cute that everyone wanted to touch her, hold her close and hug her. After all, there were never children in the castle. Millions of compliments started pouring in on the girl, and she stood and did not understand by what criteria they were evaluating her appearance. She is an ordinary girl who can simply transform into a squirrel. In the capital, completely different things were considered beautiful and cute. For example, people considered gold coins that hid the future from prying eyes to be beautiful and delightful. Jewels were beautiful, but not people. It is very difficult to get used to such an attitude. Before, my aunt had never called her beautiful or even cute, and here everyone admires her. There are completely different values here, or they consider it a beautiful thing. That's why Berta decided to put all the dots above the why. She explained to the maids that it was not a toy, it is not a thing and belongs only to itself. But the girls did not understand what she was talking about and continued to wash their hands. Finally, all these tests with the selection of dresses and changing clothes ended, and the maid said that it is possible to go downstairs for breakfast. Bertie sighed. It will be possible to get rid of these annoying maids. Another maid came up to her in the living room and thanked Berta. It turned out that her beloved was fighting together with Duke Aslan, and the girl saved him from starvation by her act. And again, the girl was deeply surprised. Some time ago, she was given a lot of compliments about her beauty, and now she is being praised for her intelligence. It turns out that she is not only beautiful, but also smart. Probably, they need to get used to it. The estate of the Duke of the North was strikingly different from life in the capital people. Here were cheerful and friendly. The palace shone with purity, beauty, and luxury. It seemed that she had fallen into a fairy tale and did not want to go back. Carlis was already waiting for her at the table in the living room. He was smiling and in a good mood. "But why did you come? To have breakfast or to see my little sister?" The guy was amused at the sight of Balachka, asked how she slept. "Earlier, my aunt said that Berta's presence at the table made everyone lose their appetite. She got used to having to eat alone. Therefore, now she was not comfortable with the fact that she eats in the presence of other people." Bertie got up from the table and headed for the exit. She apologized and said that she would wait in the room until the young Duke had breakfast. She will not interfere and spoil the guy's appetite with her appearance. But the Duke's face instantly became sad and slightly surprised. He was upset. He asked why she didn't want to have breakfast with him. Hey, unpleasant ego company. He will then leave himself so as not to spoil Balachka's mood. Bertie stopped abruptly. "What does he say?" After a little silence, she asked if she would disturb the Duke at breakfast. It might be unpleasant for him to sit at the same table with her. But the boy smiled and said that he had been waiting all night for morning to come, and then he would be able to see his little sister at breakfast. Could she really think that it is unpleasant for him to be in his company? Bertie, without thinking for a long time, climbed onto a chair and began to eat. Everything was incredibly delicious. Carlis calmly sat opposite and watched her with affection. She should ask herself, well, let her grow and grow. Breakfast was great. It turned out that eating in the presence of good people is much more pleasant than in complete solitude, but everyone treats her well only because they don't know that her father hates her. Duke Leonhardt had not been in the palace for 5 years. He spent all his time at war. Therefore, it is not known here that he hates his daughter, considering her a burden for the family. He is just ashamed of his child. When he returns from the war, everything will fall into place, and people in the palace will understand that Bertha must be treated in a completely different way. She should be despised and shunned. After all, the Duke does not need her at all. You need to calm down a little and stop believing in silly fairy tales with a happy ending. At some point, Carlis's attitude towards her will change, but she knew from the very beginning that this would be the case. But until this happens, she can be kind to all these people who surround her now. Even if it ends, she will remember these good times with gratitude. She should be kinder to the young Duke. After all, he treats her very well. Maybe he doesn't mean to call her Tails and Little Fluffy. She is really very small compared to a huge lion. The girl immediately ran to the garden and collected many different berries and nuts. So she will be able to thank all the servants, and she will take most of it to Duke Carlis. Let him also enjoy the treats. It turned out that it is very pleasant to make small cute gifts for people. Everyone, including the guards at the main gate, were pleasantly surprised by the nuts and thanked the little lady a lot. In the capital, her aunt often scolded her, and then she left food as a punishment. The girl remained hungry, but then she found a way for herself. She turned into a squirrel, ran out of the room, and went into the forest in search of delicious nuts. Once while walking in the forest, Berta saw a very beautiful tree. She approached him and touched the trunk. She felt a strange vibration. This was not the case before higher forces gave some kind of sign. This sign on her wrist began to vibrate. Singham warned her. But about what? She was beckoned somewhere by a supernatural force that she could not resist. She was confused and did not know what to do. A maid ran up to Berta and asked the girl to go home. She also heard strange sounds in the forest and felt uneasy. It was necessary to save the little lady. After all, she will not be able to protect herself. But they did not have time to escape. A whistle was heard and the animal fell on Berta's head. It was a unique white squirrel. Security immediately ran up. Everyone was frightened, and the girl froze in place, as if buried. Bertha was afraid to move because she did not know how the animal on her head would behave, but he leaned into her ear and whispered that he had finally found her, and it was more than strange. Why was he looking for her? A blizzard swirled around and a whirlwind swept across the yard. Everything happened in 1 second. The blizzard was such that absolutely nothing could be seen. When the guards came to, they did not find the little lady. She disappeared. The guards were scared out of their wits. The young master will flay them for not looking after the baby. The maid began to cry. She accompanied Balochka, but now she has disappeared. A real panic began in the palace. The demonic beast stole the little lady. He attacked her from above. He just came out of nowhere and kidnapped a harmless little girl, and after all, she came to her father and she never saw him. While everyone was looking for Balochka in the castle, Carlis wandered in the nearby northern mountains. He wanted to find the den of foxes, but instead he came across magical creatures that wandered in search of profit. His sister treated him with nuts so kindly that he decided to give her a return gift. A fur coat made of fox skins. It seemed to him that the girl would look very cute in such clothes. At home, Joanna and his personal assistant scolded him for hunting animals, and then he came to the palace with traces of blood on his clothes and hands. A little sister can be frightened by such a sight. The squirrel is still too young to understand such things, so everyone in the castle must treat her carefully. She can get very scared and simply run away. And what will they say to Duke Leonhardt then? The guy understood everything. He will no longer frighten the little one. Therefore, he will catch a rare blue fox without staining his clothes with blood. He decided that Squirrel would wear a fur coat made of the wool of this animal. It's interesting what Balochka would say about this catch. He still managed to catch the fox, and now his cute sister will have a great outfit. It is cold in the north, and she is very tiny. She needs warm clothes. Approaching the house, the boy saw that something had happened there. Everyone was busy, running here and there and constantly talking about the forest. But from afar, he could not hear the conversation completely. The security saw the ego and fell silent. Carlos's heart began to beat furiously when he approached and saw the frightened faces of the servants and guards. But he did not watch his tailed cutie Bertha. Where is she? Is he resting in his room? But the security guard stammered that the little lady had been abducted by an unknown magical beast. He appeared from the air, and no one even had time to imagine how a huge whirlwind came and took Balochka in an unknown direction. The warriors whispered that it was definitely a snowstorm squirrel. She is cunning and very dangerous. Recently, in the mountains, she killed traders who were heading to the south of the country. But where she lives and why she stole Berta, no one knew. And how could this happen? He did not follow the tailed baby, and now, no matter what, he must find her. She is definitely in danger and must hurry. The palace could not be left unattended. He even felt uneasy when he imagined that this baby was now in the paws of some bloodthirsty beast. Or maybe she was stolen in order to receive a ransom, and now she is sitting in a dark and cold dungeon. He wouldn't be Carlis from the Aslan family if he let some monster take his furry little sister. The Duke barked for all the guards in the castle to gather. They go in search of Balochka. When the squirrel came to, she did not immediately understand where she was. There was a winter forest all around. It was cold and very scary. All she remembers is the whisper of a small white squirrel on her shoulder. After looking around and calming down a little, Bertie finally realized that she was on Severnaya Gora. But how could she be here? Who brought her here? Suddenly, she heard a voice. Someone quietly greeted her and said that she had finally reached the right place. Returning, the girl saw a small white squirrel in the snow. She was the one talking to her. The animal called Birdie a fragment. Then he explained that it is a fragment of a star. No matter how hard Birdie tried, she still couldn't understand anything. What other star? What fragment? What is this strange squirrel talking about? And she said that the girl is part of it. White Fluffy began to explain in a different way, so that it would be more understandable. Belchonok said that he is a constellation, the ruler of all stars. To be more precise, there is a constellation of squirrels in the sky. Earlier, the girl had heard something about the constellations and about the fact that the ancestors of beastmen live on them, but she could not even think that such a thing exists in reality, and now she sees her ancestor. Just in case, Berta checked with the squirrel whether her train of thought was correct, and he nodded positively. It was thanks to him that she ended up here. But this is not for long. The constellation just wants to talk to her. And then there was silence. The girl finally understood. When she died, all this movement in time was arranged for her by the constellation. That is why she has a second chance to change everything. Sazvezdi reported that it will disappear soon. Bertha must take care of this magical animal, that is, a white squirrel. And he also needs to tell the girl something very important, or rather the reason why she got into the past. But only the constellation began its story as the magical time ended, and the voice began to slowly disappear. As a result, she did not hear anything. She was left with a small squirrel and zero information. Well, that's all. Fate laughs at her and makes it clear that her happy days will come oh so soon. She can't really take care of herself, so now she also has a ward, a small animal. While she was raging with anger for not being able to find out absolutely anything, strange steps were heard from afar. Birdie thought that these must be monsters for sure. They definitely exist in these forests. But, as it turned out a minute later, it was a man. Besides, his voice was very familiar to the girl. Another minute, and Berta saw a young man in a black hoodie in the clearing. He seemed very excited and slightly confused. Just in case, the squirrel raised her hands up, showing that she has no weapon and is completely harmless. Who knows what this man needs, and why he wanders alone in the middle of the forest. Bertha expected anything from the stranger, but not that he would start laughing loudly. He was not only suspicious, but also very strange. What is this laughter for? What's funny? That it was stolen. In addition, it was at this moment that the torrential rain began. Only ego was not enough in this stupid situation. Birdie took a step to leave, but the stranger told her to stay put. Then the young man told the girl not to worry. He will simply save her from this monster. That is, he will destroy the squirrel. But she screamed and hid the animal in her arms. This is not a simple, ordinary forest squirrel, but a very important magical animal. He was sent to her by a special constellation, and Bertha must take good care of him. Therefore, the squirrel will not give in both. Bertha tearfully begged the guy not to harm the little creature. If the squirrel dies, she will never be able to communicate with the magical constellation, and it is extremely necessary for her. Surprisingly, the stranger very quickly agreed not to touch the animal. The rain continued to pour, as if from a bucket, and Berta began to sneeze from the cold. She was almost completely soaked and very frozen. The guy held out his little hand and asked to follow him. You can't continue to stand in the rain. It won't take long to catch a cold, and he doesn't want this very much, so he has to help the young lady. Bertie frankly told the young man that half an hour ago she thought him strange, and now, when he called her lady, he seems even more strange to her. And where will he take her to hide from the rain? But the guy said that RT should look no less strange. Her clothes do not suit the weather at all, and she also carries a bag with a strange animal inside. So which of them looks weirder? He opened one half of his cloak and offered the girl to hide there. He said that he saw a forest house not far from here. He can take her there to dry out and wait out the storm. A few minutes later, the stranger and the little squirrel were already opening the door to the small house. It was a temporary residence of hunters. At that time, the house was empty, and it was very convenient. Thanks to the huge cloak of this strange man, she did not get wet and even warmed up a little. What could not be said about him himself? The guy was soaking wet, but for some reason he was smiling. Bertha perfectly understood that the stranger was very cold. He trembled, but tried his best not to show it. Therefore, she suggested that he take off his wet cloak. You can't let him get sick, otherwise she will feel guilty about it, and if he doesn't want to show his face, she's ready to turn away so he can take off his hood. The guy thought for a while. Indeed, it would be nice to take off a raincoat. Therefore, when the girl turned away, he threw back the hood, and then told her that she could turn back. So it seemed to Bertha that the man did not want her to see his face, and everything is not like that. He asks her to come back. And once she turned back, the first thing she saw was a black bandage over the man's eyes. Although he was blindfolded, the young man turned out to be a real handsome man. After a few minutes, he brought a bundle of wood and lit the fireplace so that they could dry and warm themselves by the fire. She caught herself thinking that she had been standing long enough and just staring at the young man. If he notices it, the situation is extremely uncomfortable. She was left alone with him in a small house in the middle of the forest. The stranger, it seems, knew everything here, because he quickly lit a fire and took out everything he needed. Then he turned to the girl, called her a young lady again, and asked her to move closer to the fire so it would be warmer. Squirrel's cheeks turned pink, and it was not clear whether it happened because of the heat or because she was embarrassed. The man knelt down and offered to carry her closer to the fireplace if it was difficult for her to walk by herself. The situation grew hotter by the minute, and now Bertha was no longer pink, but rather bright red. What does that say? Actually, she can walk herself. It is not necessary to carry it in your arms. The stranger smiled enigmatically, and poor Balachka was completely angry and looked at him from the bottom of his mouth. He is so handsome that she could not even take offense at him normally. She read about such people in books. They were called womanizers. Before, Bertha did not understand at all how people could fall into the hands of such fatal men, losing all their wealth and dignity. But with such an appearance as that of this stranger, it is even very easy to do. The guy leaned very close to the girl, and she felt his breath very close to her. Even despite the fact that he was blindfolded, the girl understood that he was looking directly at her. He asked what the young lady was thinking about. The girl did not understand how to react to such actions of this lover. She has no power, no money. What a benefit to him from the fact that she will fall in love with him. You need to be constantly on the lookout. She thought that it was necessary to move back as far as possible. Otherwise, the guy will hear that her stomach rumbles. She hasn't eaten anything since morning. Bertha hoped that the noise of the rain would drown out all extraneous sounds, and she would be able to veil all this awkwardness. For some reason, Bertha remembered the breakfasts and dinners at the Duke's house. There was always a lot of food on the table because Carlos loved to eat well. That's why she was cranky all the time and refused various treats. The guy sat quietly, did not say anything, but only smiled sweetly. He perfectly understood that the girl was hungry, and it was not rain at all, but sounds from her stomach. How stubborn she is. Why don't you say everything directly? A minute later, he took out a small bag from his pocket and handed it to the squirrel. Once I opened it, I saw small sweet cookies. How convenient it was. Now she will not die of hunger. This stranger took care of it. She thanked the guy and then took one cookie, broke it in half, and handed one part to the man, but he politely refused. It turned out that he does not like such snacks and he is not hungry at all. Here Bertha had a logical question. If he is not hungry and does not like sweets at all, then why does he carry a bag with such a delicacy in his pocket? Or is he used to feeding all the homeless and needy? The girl was so fascinated by food that she decided to think about it later. The cookies were really delicious, so she, not paying much attention to etiquette, devoured the sweets one by one. When there was silence and Bertha had finally had her fill of goodies, she heard a rumbling sound, and it did not come from her stomach. What a fool she is. After all, the guy is also hungry. It's just that it's uncomfortable for him to tell about it. The girl immediately started apologizing. She felt extremely stupid. What an unscrupulous woman. She ate everything and did not leave a single crumb, but the guy said that this is not a problem. When the rain ends, he will go hunting. Birdie automatically looked out the window. What is this fool talking about? The rain pours down as if from a bucket, and one gets the impression that it will never end at all. And what to do in such a situation? It was necessary to come up with something quickly. The guy is very hungry and suffers inconvenience because of her. She looked out the window again and noticed the plants sticking out from under the snow. Yes, this is a tuberose. So she found a solution to the problem. Without thinking for a long time, Birdie quickly jumped out into the street. The guy didn't even have time to ask her what happened. She ran away but still decided not to interfere. She will not be able to run far. They are deep in the forest. In the very next minute, the girl was picking berries together with the stems from under the snow. She perfectly remembered that it is impossible to separate these elements. It is possible to get poisoned. Now she will feed her savior, and also save him from hunger. Bertha gathered a whole bag of berries and returned to the house. Seeing this, the stranger asked if she knew what kind of plant it was and what its properties were, but she replied that she is well informed about it and glad that tuberose grows here. The guy was a little surprised. She knows it's poisonous, but still wants to feed it to her ego. Does she have a plan to kill? Why is she trying to kill him? He also helped her escape from certain death. Therefore, he asked a direct and logical question. The guy asked why the girl is trying to poison him with these berries, but she looked at him with bewilderment. What is he talking about? She is trying to help. For a moment, the girl was taken aback. Why does he think so? But then it came to her. Obviously, the guy doesn't know that if there is a tuberose along with the stems, then its poisonous properties disappear and it becomes quite useful. Therefore, Birdie explained to the guy that there was no evil intention in her actions. This plant is called the devil's seed, and everyone thinks that it is very dangerous, but ego can be eaten without any problems. She then talked about how to eat these berries correctly. Under no circumstances should the stems be thrown away. They are not poisonous, and that's where the antidote is, so everything is fine. No one will get poisoned. The guy listened to her attentively. It seemed that the girl was absolutely pure. There was no need to take her and wish him death. Therefore, he let go of a piece of stem and swallowed it, and then reached for the berry itself. After both of them satiated their hunger, there was silence again. In order to dilute her ego a little, Berta offered the stranger to watch the house. They are here for the first time, so it is interesting what and where they are. It is not clear why, but the girl's mood rose. She wandered around the house, and the guy silently followed her, watched and smiled. She completely stopped being afraid of him. On the contrary, she felt safe with him. Birdie looked at different boxes, looked into all the cracks she was interested in, absolutely everything, and the young man watched and thought that she had not changed at all. She remained the same as before. Her eyes are just as black and bottomless. In them you can watch forever and drown in the dark depths. Since then, absolutely nothing has changed. She remained the same cute and curious. He was terribly afraid of betraying himself. When they met, the guy almost blurted out that he still remembers the girl, but she must not know in any case. He will hide it until the very last moment. While he was deep in thought, the girl ran to the window and then shouted to her savior that the rain had stopped. The sun is shining outside again. They can go out and walk. It was wonderful. He also went to the window to make sure the weather was fine. Everything turned out very well. He will have time to return home for breakfast and remain unnoticed. Suddenly voices were heard on the street. It was the guard from the Aslan castle, which had already lost its footing in search of the girl. Birdie shouted that she was in the house and everything was fine. The girl turned to the man and said that they had come for her. She offered to go down the mountain together and her protection would help him get home. But Neznakomets politely refused and quickly said goodbye. He disappeared as suddenly as he appeared in the middle of the forest. She didn't even have time to ask him his name. It would be possible to send him gifts in gratitude. It became somehow even awkward. She can be so impolite. The shouts of the guards were getting closer to home. The knights already knew that the squirrel was there. They even saw its silhouette. One of them shouted to the young hostess that she had found the girl. Fortunately, she is healthy and everything is fine. A minute later, the young duke burst into the house and grabbed the squirrel by the shoulders. The guy was terribly frightened, but when he saw that his sister was unharmed, he calmed down a little. He was so worried about her and would not leave her unattended again. Her recent Neznakomets did not go far. He hid behind the trees and began to observe the situation. The guy saw very well how Duke Aslan treated the little girl, and he also found out that the baby's name is Birdie. Well, why does everyone call her a little lady? Isn't she a servant? The baby is not at all like a child of nobles. Her manners are completely different from the manners of children from high society. Okay, as long as he hides and watches. Then the stranger paid attention to the young man who was next to the girl. So the baby is somehow related to the Aslan family, because he is the son of Duke Leonhart. We will have to find out more about him. Finally, Carla saw an animal that, according to the guards, had stolen his little sister. No matter how strange it sounds, the kidnapper was placed in the hands of the girl, but now he will deal with him. He asked Berta to give him a squirrel. The death of this animal will be quick and painless, he promises. Well, the girl covered the little squirrel with her hands and said that she would not give it to both of them for anything. Why everyone is asking to destroy this animal. How heartless they are. She tried to explain to the guy that this squirrel is absolutely harmless and does not pose a danger. On the contrary, he is very scared and asks for help. She will protect him, so he is the way to communicate with the constellation. Berta suddenly felt a slight malaise. She began to feel dizzy and everything around her became blurry. The next minute, she lost consciousness and fell on the snow. The poor squirrel twirled around her and squealed. Then she remembers everything as if she were delirious. Carlis took her in his arms, and they descended from the mountains to the palace like lightning. At the same time, the best doctor was called to Berta's room to examine the baby. After some time, the doctor explained to the young duke that the baby's body is very different from that of a lion, and now he is very weak. Besides, she probably caught a cold during the rain. Carlis looked at his beloved Fluffy, and it was very painful. How could she get a fever from ordinary rain? Thank God she is not injured, and they will cure her cold in a few days. The young duke set the whole house on edge. The doctor was returned to Bertha's room, even if the girl was just sneezing. It's just that the guy has never been sick, and he doesn't understand what a common cold is. And he still didn't understand how his sister, the daughter of the strongest duke in the empire, could be so weak. Representatives of the Lviv family never get sick, and here is such an adventure. But on the other hand, she is not quite a lion. He sat down next to the girl's bed and watched how she breathed evenly and how her eyelashes twitched in her sleep. Next time, he will definitely protect her. This will not happen again. She will constantly be under his supervision. Birdie sneezed again, and since there was absolute silence in the house so as not to disturb the peace of the girl, all the servants again ran to this sound. And again they brought tea, warm blankets, and a lot of medicine into the room. The maid was very worried about the condition of the girl. First, the little squirrel was very cute and kind to everyone. Secondly, the young duke will remove 3 skins from them if something happens to the little girl. This situation was starting to make the girl frankly angry. Yes, she liked the attention, but not so much. She just lies with a cold, but there is always someone by her bed. They even monitor whether she is breathing normally. Well, who will like it? The next morning, Joanna came to Berta's room. The girl felt much better, but the woman asked her to stay in bed. She needs to gain strength and improve her health. Closer to dinner, Berta overheard the conversation of the 2 maids. According to them, the girl understood that Duke Leonhart was returning to the palace with knights. Will she be lucky enough to see her father? But for this, you need to get out of the room. Without saying anything to the maids, Bertie just got out of bed. She will not miss her chance to see her father no matter what. The maids understood her perfectly, but asked her to be very careful. One of the maids reported that all the commotion in the house was connected with the arrival of Duke Leonhart. He will appear in the castle soon. A is coming because of the incident with the arson of a warehouse with food and ammunition for his army. And the girl added that everyone is talking about how smart she is. After all, if she had not revealed the secret of tuberism, many soldiers of their army would simply have died, not because of battles, but because of hunger. and the war is about to end. Finally, her actions begin to give positive results. The army will not retreat, but on the contrary, will make progress in breaking through the enemy front, and most importantly, she will be able to see her father. If you think about it that way, she did all this solely out of love for her father and her own safety. She needs to take revenge on the vile aunt, as well as the traitor Ritter, and she will definitely do it. But, saving her life and trying to change everything this time, she helped many people, and this could not help but delight the little heart of the kind and brave Balochka. But that's not all. There are many good things ahead. The girl blushed a little again from her thoughts, but the maids thought that the baby's temperature had risen again, and they immediately put her to bed again. You can't let the little lady get sick again. The next morning, Berta woke up to screams coming from the street. Approaching the window, the girl saw many people. They shouted and greeted someone. Did it really happen? And the army and the Duke returned home. How joyful were the faces of the soldiers! They spent 5 long years on the battlefield, did not see their homes and families, and finally she returned to her family. Many of them did not even dream that they would see their relatives. Most of the soldiers wanted to see the little lady. After all, they considered her to be their savior. If this clever little girl had not revealed the secret of tuberism, they would have died of starvation. Squirrel asked the maid to give her the most beautiful dress and comb her hair. She must meet her father with dignity. Yes, she was insanely worried, and that's understandable. The woman quickly put the girl in order. She said that she would make everything perfect because Berta is perfect for everything, and even in her pajamas she looks very cute. But she also asked the baby not to worry, because it is very noticeable. Well, the woman, of course, overdid it about pajamas. She must meet her father in his best form. She read in books that the first impression plays a huge role, and she must please the Duke no matter what. When the servants announced that the master had arrived at the palace, the girl immediately went downstairs. The entire staff has already gathered there, as well as the manager, Joanna, and her brother, Carlos. Bertie felt a little out of sorts. The doors opened and Leonhard appeared on the threshold. Loud shouts were heard. Everyone congratulated the host on the victory and the end of the war, and on his return home. Leonhard nodded and smiled slightly. Bertha stood and was afraid to move. This is her strong and brave father, about whom the whole continent is talking. His eyes are like bright gold and radiate a strong energy, the same as Carlos's. She very much hoped that her father would not be angry with her and would not drive everyone out of the castle. But the fear did not pass. She felt that the man was looking directly at her, but she herself could not calm her trembling and raise her eyes. The girl closed her eyes in fear when the Duke approached her at arm's length. Now he will hit her, as Aunt always did, and then he will tell her to move away from his lands back to the capital. And the man actually extended his hand to the girl, but not at all to hit her. He has not seen his daughter for more than 5 years. She grew up so much and became such a cutie. I wanted to stroke her hair so much. But this did not happen, because Carlos approached them from nowhere and greeted his father. Then he congratulated him on his victory and return. He, as always, was absolutely calm. The father also greeted his son. I thanked him for saving the food situation, otherwise the army would not be able to win. His help cannot be overestimated. But the guy came up close to Berta and said that he had almost no merit in this. Berta came up with all this. It was she who found out about the antidote in the stems of tuberose. She suggested collecting plants and sending them to the front, and Berta decided not to be dragged, but to declare herself. Therefore, she turned to her father and said that it was she who discovered the properties of the plant. But that's not all. Tuberosum did not fully reveal its potential. Leonhard looked at the girl, slightly annoyed. Why does she call him the head of the family and treat him so officially? Maybe she is not familiar with the traditions of this house, or she does not feel well. He leaned over to Joanna, the manager, and said that it was a bit uncomfortable for him to talk to Balochka in front of many outsiders. He asked to take her to the room, and tomorrow they would talk without witnesses. The woman took the baby aside and said that the Duke was very tired after the long journey. It will be better if they meet tomorrow and talk about everything calmly. Besides, she will have time to prepare. Circumstances could not be better. Her father is a very serious person and will not listen to various nonsense, and today Balochka is too excited to express her thoughts clearly and logically. After all the greetings, Duke Leonhardt went to his office. There was no time to rest, a lot of paperwork accumulated that could not wait. His assistant entered the office and showed some information. It is necessary to settle matters with the country's economy, deal with foreign traders. Then Joanna came in and reported that the little lady had had dinner and gone to bed. The girl is no longer hot. The man thanked the woman, leaned back in the chair, exhaled noisily, and closed his eyes. "This baby is too fragile. You need to take good care of her, but despite her age, she is so smart." Bertha has changed a lot since their last meeting. She has grown up, but she remains the same sweet girl. Although he did not show it, he was very proud of what she had become. She has a lot of energy and courage, the same as in Lviv. He so wanted to hug her and hold the girl tightly to him, but he was embarrassed to do it in front of everyone, and Bertha was standing in front of him, trembling all over. She is definitely afraid of him. The Duke asked if he looked threatening. Joanna hesitated for a long time and did not know what to say, so as not to offend and anger the man, but his assistant honestly said that the look of the Duke is so frightening that many are even afraid to look him in the eye. The guy said that Leonhardt inspires terror not only in the hearts of enemies, even the closest people who know him well are afraid of him. His look makes everyone tremble and his icy voice simply kills. After such frankness of his assistant, the Duke was a little depressed. Now he did not seem fierce and all-powerful. Rather, he looked tired and broken, and he is the same person as others, with the same feelings. How to win the trust and love of your little daughter. He needs to come up with something. It should not look obtrusive, and the Duke decided to prepare something in order to correct the situation. Leonhardt wrote something for a long time on sheets of paper, and then called an assistant and asked him to prepare everything for tomorrow's meeting with Bertha. After seeing the records, the guy smiled and said that he would prepare everything. In the morning, the little squirrel couldn't find its place. She put on her best dress, braided her hair, and went down to the living room. It cannot be said that fear and worries have passed. She was still worried before the important conversation with Duke Leonhardt. When Berta came to the table, she immediately opened her mouth in surprise. Why are there so many unique sweets here? The chef decided to organize an exhibition of desserts in honor of the arrival of the main host. And maybe today is some kind of holiday. The Duke's assistant immediately ran up to the girl. He helped the little girl sit down at the table and politely asked what delicacy she would like to start with. Mr. Leonhardt prepared everything for her. As it turned out, the Duke hired the most famous confectioner in the country so that he could prepare all these delicacies for the little daughter's ego. Each dessert is unique. Everyone sat down at the table, but instead of eating, they looked at the little lady. They kept asking the girl to eat more, try each sweet, and choose the ones she likes the most. After some time, the girl decided to get down to business. Breakfast was late. She thanked for the treat and said that she came down here not only to have breakfast, but also to settle one very important matter. The Duke looked at the girl carefully. It seems that she inherited his courage and stubborn character. The baby knows exactly what she needs and why she came here. Therefore, the man said that he was ready to listen to her. Bertie reported that she has been collecting information about the northern lands for quite a long time. Now it becomes obvious that the flow of people to these territories has recently decreased significantly, and this has a bad effect on the development of the region. Leonhardt asked where the girl got such accurate and analytical information. She just arrived recently, but Berta could not tell that she had wandered around in the form of a squirrel for enough time, so it is much easier to collect the necessary information. The baby continued. The mountains that surround the lands of the Duchy of Aslan create an impenetrable defense, but on the other hand, they really interfere with any kind of agriculture. Therefore, residents have to buy food from external sources. But even after the end of the long and painful war, according to the girl, the affairs of these lands will not improve. In the near future, prices for seeds of food crops will rise very much. Bertie knew this very well, as she had already visited the future and experienced all the hardships of the post-war years on herself. She remembers this because the servants almost stopped bringing her food. But the girl is here precisely in order to solve the duchy's food problem, and she knows exactly how to do it. She has already managed to save people, and she will not stop there. Everything she needs will remain in the castle. Much to Bertha's surprise, the Duke listened to her quite indifferently. Then the man told her not to worry about it. He has already solved this problem and will buy food in the neighboring kingdom of Sadis. They have rich lands. On a cold server, the bitter winter comes every hour. This is what the Duchy of Aslan is known for on their continent, and also by constant invasions of other lands. The Duke liked to seize other people's weak territories. She heard the assistant say that if the neighboring states do not want to trade with them, they will simply take their food by force. Berta now understood why Aslan's lands are called the lands of bandits. The girl tried to object. According to the elders, a terrible drought is coming. Peasants cannot cope with this problem. How will they take the stocks of the neighbors if they also have nothing? Bertie once again hinted that not all problems can be solved by force. That is why she came up with an alternative solution to this problem. All that is needed is for the Duke to listen to her to the end. In the next moment, the girl handed her father a pot with a small green plant. Having looked closely, the man understood that this was a tuberosum. Usually the ego is perceived as a weed in the road. Why did she put her ego in a flower pot? The Duke smiled. A flower in a pot looked like the most expensive gift. The girl tried and grew an ego for Leonhardt. Probably she wants to start growing tuberose in the duchy on an industrial scale. Count Gelot smiled and politely objected. Even the most patient soldiers cannot eat this potion for long. They have been asking them for almost a month already. And to be honest, he has really disgusting taste. It seemed that the girl was reading the manager's mind. She asked if he was worried about eating a tuberose berry, and she immediately continued that she solved this problem a long time ago. It turns out that one plant is not enough. Then she removed the napkin from the plate, and everyone present stared at its contents. There was soup. He was very attractive in appearance and emitted a wonderful aroma. The girl saw the reaction very well and said that this soup was prepared precisely from tuberosum. The recipe is simple, but he and Joanna had to work hard to get the dish to the desired taste. Suddenly, the Duke jumped up to the girl and nervously asked if she had already tried this dish. Bertie calmly replied that she had eaten a whole plate, but she could not present the soup to another. She had not tried it herself. The Duke didn't even listen to everything else Berta said. He shouted that the chief doctor should be called to the palace this minute because the baby had eaten soup from a poisonous plant. If you do not help her in time, she will die from poisoning. Berta was even a little afraid of the man's reaction. Well, how to explain to all of them that this food is absolutely safe and has been tested many times. She also makes sure that there is no food crisis in the duchy. And here it is, the solution to this problem. Bertie looked at her father for the 10th time this morning and said that she was all right, but he said that she was not at all like him and his brother. Bertie is too small and fragile, so the potion can hurt her. For some reason it hurt her, and it was a little strange to hear such words from her own father. He said that the girl did not look like him. When others said it, it was not so embarrassing, and now tears treacherously came to the eyes. But on the other hand, if the father did not care about his own daughter, then he would not have asked to call a doctor and would not have worried so much about her condition, so she still means something to him. And maybe this opinion is wrong. Suddenly, the Duke is completely worried about a friend. Maybe he is afraid of rumors that his daughter was poisoned in a strange way. Why does he have extra gossip and family shame? Bertie felt completely broken. Probably the father released the doctor only because he simply did not trust her. If this is so, then she will not be able to convince him that this method is quite simple and effective. While father and daughter were arguing, they did not notice how the doctor entered the room. Everyone parted so that he could examine the little lady. A few minutes later, the man stated that the girl was completely healthy. Bertha could have gloated, but she didn't. On the contrary, she thought that Northerners are very strange people. They call a doctor for any trifle. It seemed that these people were too concerned about health. When the doctor left, the little squirrel decided to continue the conversation with her father. The problem with food and food in the north has not been solved. Everyone needs to calm down and listen to each other's suggestions. When Leonhardt said that he was ready to listen to the girl further, she put a few more dishes on the table in front of the men instead of words. It was a tuberose baked in sauce, a tuberose salad, and a light dessert made from the same berry. Berta smiled and said that this is not all the dishes that she can prepare from this plant. The menu is very diverse, and most importantly, all these dishes are delicious and give a feeling of satiety. In addition, the girl noticed that there are also some very important factors. This is the taste, price, and availability of tuberosum. The plant has all these advantages, therefore, hunger in the north is no longer a problem. Bertha saw how surprised everyone present was by her act, and this made the girl very happy. She convinced everyone that it is possible to create miracles from ordinary weeds and direct them to the welfare of the duchy. The Duke himself, for some reason, remained unperturbed. It seemed that he did not fully believe in the sincerity of the girl's intentions. In addition, she constantly repeated about some kind of deal between them. What does she mean? What does this little brave squirrel want? A bunch of new expensive toys? Own a huge mansion by the sea? Or does she need the most beautiful star from the sky which is named in her honor? But on the other hand, Leonhardt perfectly understood that if this beautiful baby did not want, he would happily do absolutely everything. Therefore, the man asked what she wanted in return for the recipe for her dishes. The girl's answer followed immediately. She calmly replied that she would like to stay in her father's castle until she grows up, and if the father allows, she will gladly help in whatever way she can. A minute of absolute silence followed. It was the most difficult minute in Berta's life. Now her fate was decided. They will be allowed to stay, or they will be chased away and forced to leave the castle by evening. Leonhardt carefully examined the girl. Why does she want to stay here? Maybe because of heredity, but she will still receive half of his property. Maybe there are other reasons. For example, she lived very badly in the capital. Berta decided to break the silence and said that she did not need luxury apartments. She is ready to live in an ordinary room for servants. If even this does not suit the Duke, then she even agrees to a basement room. If Leonhardt knew how to blush from shame, he would probably just burn. How can his own daughter say such things? What is the basement? Hey, they didn't show her room? The manager cleared his throat and nervously began to explain that Mr. Carlos had personally given the little girl a tour of her apartment, and she spent her last nights there. She has a lot of servants and a personal maid. In order for the Duke to stop yelling at the manager, the squirrel decided to intervene in their conversation. She said that her brother had indeed shown her everything, but she had enough of a more modest room. She was not used to luxury at all. All she asks her father is to let her stay here and not go back to the capital. Berta thought about herself that she would be able to run away anywhere when she grew up, and then she will realize her dream, become a saleswoman. The Duke was silent again and looked at the baby. After a long pause, the man said that this should not happen. Berta's mood immediately deteriorated. Can he offer to pay for accommodation, or even get a job as a servant in the castle? The little girl could barely hold back her tears and could not understand what the man meant. He simply told her to go to his room and said that it is not customary to pay for accommodation in his family's house. It seemed that Berta had angered her father. Well, what should she do now? Such a brilliant plan has completely failed. No one is interested in tuberium dishes, and no one is going to leave it in the castle. You will have to start all over again. Completely disappointed, the girl returned to her room, but a servant was waiting for her there. The maids offered her warm milk, toys, delicious food, sang lullabies to her, and tried to cheer her up in any way they could, but it turned out very poorly. Bertha climbed into bed and seemed to be about to burst into tears. Well, why is everyone so kind to her, and her own father treats her like a stranger? Is he sorry that she will live in her parents' house until she comes of age? Meanwhile, Carlos entered the room and, seeing the state of his little sister, became very worried. He asked the maids what the problem was, but they didn't know what exactly upset the little squirrel. The guy quietly sat down on the bed next to the baby and carefully stroked her lush red hair. He asked who offended the little tail. Let him only say, and he will completely understand two accounts. Even this strong and self-confident lion was now as kind and affectionate as possible to her. If only her father had stroked her hair, she would be extremely happy then. When the girl was left alone in the room, she again had the opportunity to think about the current situation. Why do they continue to take care of her? After all, the Duke made it clear that it was time for Bertha to leave the castle and return to the capital. At first, her goal was to stay in her father's castle solely for safety reasons, but it turned out that there are a lot of good people here, and most of them sincerely love her. Bertie would very much like to stay and live with them. But to become part of the castle, she needs to try again to convince her father to leave her here. She still could not understand what his words about the fact that they do not pay for housing in their parents' house meant. While Bertha slept peacefully in her bed, the conversation continued in the Duke's study. Joanna worked hard, the little lady fell asleep. She asked questions well during the day, walked, but went to bed early, and was very sad. Leonhardt said that everyone should constantly watch the squirrel and follow every little thing. The baby is very weak. She will not withstand the northern cold, and he is not going to just watch her suffer. He wanted to return it to the capital because there is a wonderful warm climate that promotes the growth of the body. But it turns out it's very lonely there, so Berta tries with all her might to stay here, in the north. The manager interrupted the man's thoughts. Count Gelot assumed that it was in the capital that the Duke's daughter would be in maximum safety. Perhaps the Duke is uncomfortable hearing this, but he himself understands that this is the best of the options. Leonhardt did not even want to listen to the young man. He understood that it is necessary to reason with a clear head. But on the other hand, the little girl missed her parents' home so much that she decided to run away from the vicar. The child's ego just wanted to see his father. The Duke's aide objected. The guy said that small children should live with their parents. Besides, there are a lot of children in the north. They are all healthy and cheerful. Therefore, the cold is not a reason to send the little lady back to the capital. It seemed to the Duke that his head would soon burst from thoughts. He should be strong and calm, but now he looks weak and vulnerable. But he will leave his daughter here for a while. Sumayut will take good care of her in the castle. The girl simply cannot be let go. He had wanted to see her for so long, not to send her to the capital again. Besides, she is a real genius. Not everyone can try to help solve the food problem. However, the Duke became interested in why his sister, Viscountess Farina Sirius, did not tell him anything about it. After all, he gave her clear instructions to communicate even about the little things that concern his daughter. The manager, to the Duke's surprise, again began to side with the Duke's sister. He said that Mrs. Farina taught him every day. Perhaps not all news reached Leonhardt on the battlefield. The woman wrote that there were no problems with the girl. She behaves a little strangely, withdrawn and reticent. Perhaps an outsider tricked Belotchka into escaping from her aunt's custody. But the Duke's assistant objected again. It is necessary to punish those people who left the baby unattended. After all, the road to the north is very dangerous, and if the girl could not withstand such a difficult road, Leonhardt ordered to strengthen security and surveillance of Belotchka. After some time, the assistant brought into his office all the personal files of those who were close to Berta, starting with the defenders of the lady in the capital and ending with reporters. A particularly serious young man took up surveillance of the servants of Mrs. Farina's estate in the capital. He wants to know what they were doing when the little girl ran away. He sent the best people to investigate. The Duke thought that the guy was absolutely right. Before sending the girl back to her sister, it is necessary to find those responsible for what happened. He does not want his daughter to feel bad. Berta slept badly at night. She had nightmares, her aunt, and the traitor, Ritter. It was better not to lie down at all. The governess was already busy in the room, preparing clothes for the little mistress, airing the room. But here the girl smelled a pleasant smell, and, turning my head, I saw several huge baskets with beautiful bright yellow flowers. There were so many of them that Bertha could hide among the buds and petals. And her attention was also attracted by a huge red toy squirrel. She was very cute, and she held a golden hazelnut in her paws. But where did all this come from in her room? No one came in the evening. Flowers in the north of the country are insanely expensive due to the fact that there is barren soil. Even one flower is beyond the pocket of an ordinary resident, and there are hundreds of them here. Who is this person who sent her all this luxury? And the toy squirrel looked like a real giant. Berta didn't even know that such huge toys existed in reality. How did this squirrel even get into her bedroom door? The maid smiled at this picture. The baby hugged the soft toy and tried to take the golden nut from it. With such a nut, you can open your own business. The girl asked if Berta liked the Duke's gift. The girl immediately froze in place. Her heart began to beat like crazy. Is it really all about Dad? But why? The maid replied that this is how the General Hotel would thank her for the recipes from tuberosum. She did not even fully understand whether to be happy for her or not. Maybe her father sent gifts, and then he will order her to pack up and go to the capital, although he appreciated the recipes, which is already very good. For about an hour, the girl walked around the room and just smiled, and then she asked the maid to bring her paper and a pen. She wants to write a letter to her father and ask him for a meeting. Berta still did not lose hope of establishing a relationship with him. At first, the little girl thought to deliver her message through the maid, but at the last moment she decided to take the letter personally and hand it directly to the Duke. That's exactly what she did. The Duke was sitting in his office. His appearance was quite pensive. He accepted the letter and asked if it would be possible to read it right now. Bertie nodded. She was not afraid of her father's anger because the text of the letter was quite warm. The man barely smiled, and so I wanted to take this red-haired girl in my arms and hug her. What could this little girl write with her little pen? Probably words of gratitude for the toys. To the great disappointment of the Duke, there were no words of admiration and gratitude. His daughter painted several more recipes and technologies for making tuberosum. This is certainly good, but he expected the second. Here the girl cleared her throat and said that she decided to thank her father personally, and not with the help of writing, "Hey, I really liked the gifts," but the best gift for her would be permission to stay in the north. Leonhardt's expression immediately changed. He became serious and cold, and then answered that he would never allow her to stay in the castle. Over time, she will understand why he does this. What was a little girl to do? The negotiations reached an impasse. She asked to leave her here until she comes of age. Mais сейчас, her task was to convince her father to visit him at least for a month. Voiced his most stupid thought, he said that he would build the same castle for her in the capital. It has an unusual architecture because its walls go not only underground but also into the surrounding mountains. Of course, due to the special landscape in the capital, the builders will not be able to recreate the structure 100%, but the Duke will order, and they will try to make it as similar as possible. The girl lowered her head so that the man would not see that she was about to cry. Then Berta said that there is no need to build anything in the capital. She cannot return to the place where the people she ran away from live. She perfectly understood that if she appeared in the capital again, Auntie and Ritter would definitely find a way to kill her, and who knows if she will have a chance to be saved again. After a minute, Bertha stood up decisively and said that she was capable of helping the Duke in the war. After all, there are often wars with neighbors in the north. She is a very good strategist, and she has already proven it. The Duke wanted to laugh. She may be a good strategist, but he will have to appoint half an army to protect her. She is really very cute, but it is too dangerous to leave her in the north. He didn't answer anything. Nothing specific. He simply said in a tired voice that in a few minutes he has the next meeting, so they should end the conversation. In addition, the squirrel needs to rest. The man stood up and stroked Berta's fluffy red hair very gently. He did it with such trepidation that the girl was even afraid to breathe. But it didn't last very long. The man removed his hand, turned around, and silently left. Bertie stood in the office for some time and could not move. Then she touched her head in those places where the Duke's hand had touched. For the first time in his life, her father showed at least some warm feelings towards her. For the next several weeks, the Duke was absent from the castle, but not a day passed without gifts from him, and every day there were new surprises. Expensive dresses, toys, jewelry, souvenirs. Berta did not regard these gestures as ordinary kindness. It seemed to her that in this way, this callous man was hinting to her that it was time to know the honor. Hey, you don't need all these valuable things. The greatest value for her is the Duke's love. That's why Berta decided to act with a radical method. She speaks to the man, all the gifts from Leonhardt in a large wagon and brought to the man's office. It turned out to be quite a lot. She barely made it through the door. Berta managed to impress her father. He was very surprised and asked what all this meant. The baby calmly replied that she had brought all his gifts and wanted to return them to the Duke. The man asked for an explanation. He thought that the girl really likes gifted things. Well, she answered that she needs a completely different gift, and this permission will remain in the parental home. The Duke looked thoughtfully at Bertha, who was briskly unloading a cart with various boxes. How he regretted that he did not participate in her life. He did not see how she grew up, did not hug her, did not play with her. He missed her entire childhood. The last time he hugged her was when the girl turned 1, but it seemed to him as if it was yesterday. The more he looks at Berta, the less he wants to let the baby go away from him. Winter has not yet come, and even in the north it is still summer. Can the little girl be allowed to live here before the cold starts? And then he will definitely come up with something and send it back. Most of all, the man was afraid to show his weakness and true feelings towards this little girl. He put on a mask of seriousness and said in a calm voice that he would allow Berta to stay in the castle until winter. The baby's happiness knew no bounds. Did she really manage to melt the ice in the heart of this magnificent man? So there is hope that the father loves her at least a little bit. Maybe she will be able to convince him to leave her until the summer. She so wanted to run to the Duke and hug him tightly, but she restrained herself with all her might. There is a little more than a month left until winter, and we need to come up with something to stay here longer. Then the Duke asked the girl to collect all her gifts and take them back to her room. He gave them so that she would receive positive emotions, and he would be offended if she returned them back. The girl quickly nodded her head, and then, even unexpectedly for herself, leaned into the man's ear and asked, instead of a bunch of gifts, he would give her the usual paternal hugs and the opportunity to spend more time together. Meanwhile, at the other end of the country, in the capital of the Kingdom of Astrum, a big celebration began. There were many people on the streets, and the atmosphere seemed very lively. The life of the city, as always, was the key. Guards were lined up on the main street, and after a few minutes the imperial carriage appeared, in which His Majesty and his wife were accommodated. The people shouted and greeted the head of state. Nader Dux Astrum, the king of the state, was still quite young. He sat majestically in a carriage and smiled at the townspeople. They all thanked him for the fact that he was able to stop the war and give people some peace. But, having listened more closely to what the townspeople in the crowd were shouting, the emperor felt quite uncomfortable. Why do they glorify Duke Aslan? Why not him, namely the northern leader of the lands, the glorious commander, Duke Leonhardt? The woman tried to calm the emperor down and asked him not to take the shouts of the stupid people to heart. They know nothing about military strategy. The head of the country should not be on the battlefield. He leads the state. And the emperor's companion said that she has a very good plan to get rid of the annoying duke, but you need to listen to her carefully. To do the job perfectly, you need to be a master in your field. Meanwhile, Count Gellet received an unknown man in his office in the middle of the night, and it seems the manager was somewhat alarmed. He asked the stranger not to come to the castle for some time, so as not to arouse suspicion. It seems that the man was not very worried about this. He smiled at the count and said that everything is fine. He is here completely secretly, and no one has seen him. He thought everything through in advance. Not a single living soul in the castle knows that his own daughter set fire to warehouses with provisions and weapons for Duke Leonhardt's army. She fulfilled the order and died as it was agreed. The body was certainly not found. Count Gellet looked straight at the man with a serious look. Why is he telling this to him? Is he really waiting for sympathy? But they agreed on everything in advance. Both he and his daughter knew what they were getting into. Therefore, the conversation is inappropriate. The man was silent for a minute. It seemed that he was considering the manager's claims. Then he said that he is not asking for pity for his dead daughter, but I would like to receive the promised payment for my services. They also agreed on this in advance. His daughter took care of her younger brothers and sisters and helped her father a lot in the household. So if Count Gelit provides funds for the maintenance of his younger children, the eldest daughter will sleep peacefully in the afterlife. He does not demand anything more. The manager once again looked at the guest with a piercing look and asked him to come to the table. He opened the locker himself, pretending to take money out of it. He said that his gratitude would be very great, and that the man did not even expect such generosity. The next minute, when the stranger approached the table, Gelit took out a dagger from the bedside table with a sharp movement and plunged it into the man. This was his reward for a job well done. Then the killer asked to say hello to his daughter. Then the count called his loyal assistant to him and asked him to remove the man's corpse from the office. He nodded silently and then said that a guest was waiting for him in the living room. This is a woman who came to him from the capital. Gelit's mood immediately changed. He did not expect that the lady would personally visit him and decide to go from the capital to the far north. But there is nothing to do. You will have to accept the woman with all honors. Meanwhile, Bertha was busy writing a letter to her father. She needs to convince the Duke to let her stay in the castle as long as possible. It is desirable that he allow the girl to live here until the age of majority. But for some reason, Berta did not get anything meaningful. She could not concentrate and choose the right words. Therefore, the girl decided to change the situation and turned into a fluffy red squirrel. The frosty air and open space really came in handy. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. How she liked it in this harsh and cold land. She was loved here. She remembered the capital and thought that the center of the cold was located there. Even Aunt Farina's servants despised her there. At the sight of her, they became angry and chased her to the farthest corner of the house. In such cases, she climbed onto the highest branch of the tree so that no one could see her, let alone reach her. She enjoyed the silence, listened to the sound of the wind, and put her thoughts in order. And now she climbed to the very top of the tree. But in the next minute, it turned out that the window of Duke Leonhardt's study was clearly visible from this place. The man was sitting at the table and working with papers. The girl listened. Her father was talking to his assistant. It was about her. The Duke studied the origin and meaning of her name. The word Berta meant blessed with happiness. Every time the man said his daughter's name out loud, a sincere smile appeared on his face. He did not choose a name for his child, but it turned out that the girl introduced herself. She called herself Berta, not even knowing that this was his favorite female name. It always caused warm and tender feelings inside. It is a pity that he did not give her this name. It is interesting why the daughter chose him. The assistant looked out the window and saw the swaying branches of the tree near the window. The guy guessed out loud that someone was there, but the Duke replied that it was just the wind, and he opened the window in case Squirrel wanted to come to him. Bertha was shocked by what she heard and saw in the window. It turns out that the father was thinking about her name all this time. She received her ego in her past life before the resurrection, and she seemed to her to be a symbol of deep indifference. And now she is 8 years old again, and she learned that despite endless wars, her father did not stop thinking about her. He did not forget her for a minute. He remembered her, but there were probably reasons why the Duke did not make himself known. And the girl assumed that there is hope that her father, at least a little, but still loves her. After all, she also thought about him all these years, because she sincerely loves her daddy and wants to be with him. All the next day, Berta felt excellent. She was in high spirits, and the servants could not understand what had happened to their little mistress. She directly glowed with happiness. The girl had an unfinished part of the strategy. She must use a secret recipe and bake a delicious tuberose cookie for her father. The man will try his ego and will not resist her request. After a while, the little girl went to the Duke's study, and in her hands was a tray with cookies, jam, and tuberose cupcakes. In addition, she prepared her father's favorite tea. This time the plan should work. But then, the worst thing happened. A woman was standing near the door to her father's office, and Berta remembered this silhouette very well. She could not be mistaken. This was her Aunt Farina. But what the hell? What is she doing here? The girl's hands and feet immediately became cotton wool, and the tray flew out of her hands. The cups and saucers broke into pieces, and Bertie simply froze in place. We need to pull ourselves together and pull ourselves together. Otherwise, everything is lost." The woman looked at the baby and smiled mischievously. Then she said that Bertie remained as clumsy as before. "I wonder who she went to." Then the woman came closer and began to deliberately stomp on the liver scattered on the floor. The aunt perfectly understood that this was causing the girls a lot of pain because she was trying for her father, but Betty decided to remain silent and not start a conflict. Next, Irina looked intently into the girl's eyes and said that she was very upset by the escape of the little girl. For the first time, she forgives her, but asks her not to run away from home again. Now Berta clearly realized that she would make every effort not to return to the capital, namely to her aunt's house. She will no longer allow this vile traitor to make fun of her. Therefore, when Farina wanted to touch Berta's hair, she sharply pushed her hand away and asked her never to approach her again. And the woman understood from the expression on the girl's face that she was not joking at all. Her look changed, became bold and open. The aunt's conversation with her niece took place in front of the maids. Therefore, the woman decided to smooth the situation and said that in the north the baby was spoiled very much. Now it will be necessary to teach her good manners again. But Berta decided that this time she would not give herself to both. She shouted for Farina to take off her shoes now. Their house is very clean, but the woman stains the floor with her dirty shoes. Berta couldn't stand it anymore and got down on the floor to pick up the spoiled cookies. She tried so hard for her beloved daddy, but this evil woman, as always, ruined everything. Why doesn't she sit in the capital? Suddenly, the door from the office opened, and Duke Aslan Leonhardt himself appeared on the threshold. He was very serious and asked what happened. Aunt's expression changed in seconds. She put her sweetest smile on her face. Nothing has changed in the man since he was considered the most handsome man in the empire. Although no, it has changed. He became even more attractive. Continuing to smile, Farida began to bow and greet Leonhardt, and he looked at Berta and her disappointed look. Probably the tray was too heavy, so she dropped it. What a pity, the baby must have tried very hard. It seemed that the aunt would burst with anger now. The man didn't notice her at all, or simply pretended that he didn't see anyone here except Balachka. But why does he persistently ignore her? Suddenly the Duke noticed that the baby was looking at the floor and looked there. Cookies were lying on the ground, and the little girl said that she was preparing them especially for her daddy. She so wanted him to enjoy the delicious taste. The man's eyes became round. How? Was this little girl trying for him? Did she want to please him? The Duke held himself in his hands so as not to burst into tears, because this situation touched him to the core. Ego Baby baked emu cookies with her own hands. Therefore, he bent down and began to collect crumbs with his own hands. Farina's eyes slowly climbed to her forehead. In order not to remain in an awkward situation, the matron began to joke with the maids who were watching the whole situation from afar. She laughed that the servants in this castle are very observant, but too lazy. But the Duke sharply asked the woman to stop chattering and not to offend his staff. He will not allow anyone to mock his servants, because they are the same people as the Duke himself. The woman did not expect such a turn at all. She got into an unpleasant situation and now looks extremely stupid, both in front of the servants and in front of Leonhardt himself. And all because of this nasty girl. The girl tried to be as inconspicuous as possible and carefully observed the behavior of her aunt and her father. It seemed that the father was not very happy to see a woman in his house. She managed to make him angry in a few minutes. Out of the corner of his eye, the man noticed how Berta was trying to seem indifferent to this incident, but she was doing it badly. He thought that the child should not see him swearing with the Viscountess. Everyone around him is already afraid of him, and now he scared even a little girl. Bertie will begin to think that he is a real despot and will not want to stay in the castle anymore. After all, their relationship has just begun to develop. Therefore, in the same steely tone, the man asked the little girl to go to his room. He invited the Viscountess to his office. He had a lot of questions for the woman, and there is not much pleasant there. Farina again broke into a smile. She was not at all against being left alone with the Duke, without this nasty child. Although he is a rather rude man, he is very handsome. and she needs that. In vain, the woman expected any courtesies from the Duke. He was extremely serious, and after a short pause asked Firin to explain himself. How did it happen that Balochka ran away from the capital? While the sly relative tried to open up, the situation kept getting worse. The Duke was not kidding at all. He asked why she allowed the little girl to go alone to the far north. The Viscountess had decided from the beginning that she would place all the blame on her niece. Therefore, the woman began to smile stupidly, said that Bertie was still a child, so she came up with an escape plan for herself. I probably read about it in children's books. Leonhardt was silent. He perfectly understood that this vile woman wanted to get out of the water dry. It seems that the vicar wants to shift all responsibility to the 8-year-old child. It became clear to the man why his poor little daughter developed an escape plan and decided to run away from the capital as far as possible. Probably, this nasty liar treated the baby terribly. The Viscountess was not used to accepting defeat, so she continued to lie. She reminded that every month she wrote to the Duke about the upbringing of his daughter. Therefore, it is his fault that he did not react in any way. As soon as she discovered that the baby had run away, she immediately used the magical royal communication line and reported what had happened. As a close relative, she did everything in her power. Leonhardt menacingly replied that he remembered her short letters perfectly, but, unfortunately, for some reason they didn't have a single word about how talented, smart, and resourceful my little girl is. The existing situation played completely against the favor of the actress, and she perfectly understood it. Where can this nasty and stupid half-breed get any talents? This is just a misunderstanding. But the Duke objected and said that everyone who managed to communicate with Berta praised her for her kindness, honesty, sincerity, and sharp mind. Many ego advisors consider the girl a real genius. The woman frowned. What a fucking genius. She had never noticed anything like that behind this ugly girl. Yes, and where does talent come from if, after the death of the baby's mother, Farina threw all the books out of the house? She even ordered the governesses not to bring books to her house and not to teach the girl anything good. All those who disobeyed her were dismissed by the vicar. She is not even sure if this stupid squirrel can read. Well, the Duke's last question drove the woman into a dead end. The man asked how she dared to negotiate with the prince about marrying Bertha. He is her father, and he himself will decide whom his daughter will marry. The man did not believe that this vile woman could arrange all this on her own. Without a doubt, someone helped her and told her what and how to do, and there is a high probability that the royal family is behind all this. Of course, the Astrom royal family was considered the most powerful and influential in the state, and in second place was the Aslan family, which was ruled by Duke Leonhardt. Apparently, the royal family had a plan. If the king's son, Prince Ritter, marries his daughter, then in this way it is possible to monopolize the blood of the two strongest families. Farina sided with the king and decided to carry out this plan on her own. She crossed the line and betrayed his family, so she must be punished. Such concessions cannot be left unpunished. And what was his little daughter guilty of, if she allowed herself to treat her like that? The woman understood that she was displeased, and if the Duke continues in the same spirit, she will be severely punished. Therefore, she decided to try at any cost to get out and convince the man that it was not her fault. And she decided to act. The Viscountess suddenly fell to her knees and began to sob. She shouted that if her sister were alive, they would not dare to treat her like that in this house. She misses her so much. Does the Duke not remember how before his death his wife asked him to take care of her younger sister Farina? So why is Leonhardt so cruel to her now and accuses her of all sins? Leonhardt bowed his head for a moment and thought, yes, in his last letter, his late wife specifically asked him not to offend and support her sister, because she would take care of their daughter. But the Duke suddenly replied that he was trying with all his might to help Farida, but after his youngest daughter ended up on the street, he no longer wants to fulfill all the whims of the vicar enough. The man said that only because of the good memory of his wife, he would allow the relative to stay in the castle for a while. He ordered the servants to prepare a guest room for her. Farida wanted to burst out of anger. She was counting on a completely different reception and a different attitude. Ideally, the Duke's proposal would be to stay with him forever, and now he even forbids her to take custody of this little girl. Her plan failed miserably. She generally cared about Berta only because it was not the Duke who asked for it, but completely different people. And she would have received a good profit from this marriage. But alas, it will not take place. But, as always, there was a backup plan B, and the woman will do everything that she was ordered to do in order to get for herself the most courageous and handsome man in the kingdom. She is ready for anything for this. The woman held up a vial of purple liquid. You just have to do as she was told, and everything will be fine with her. It's just time to drink it, and everything will fall into place. In the morning, Berta felt slightly agitated. Even her maid noticed this to avoid unnecessary questions. The girl said that she had a bad night's sleep, and how else can you sleep when Auntie is here? There was a knock on the door, and a maid appeared on the threshold with a huge box. Again, gifts from Duke Leonhardt. They will soon just be put somewhere. She asked her father not to send anything more, but of course he did not listen. This time the gift was particularly elaborate. The Duke decided to give his little one a fur coat from Severnaya Chernobyka. It was really a stunning, unique thing, but the girl in this outfit felt out of place. But it turns out that these were not all gifts. On the table lay an envelope containing a letter from the Duke. Finally, he heard her request and wrote, "She will keep this message until the end of her days." Before her reincarnation, the girl did not receive a single letter from her father. She wrote hundreds of them to him, but never received a reply. Even on her birthday, she did not hear a word from the Duke. Now she has a whole collection of short but sweet letters from her father. The days when she could only imagine what the Duke's handwriting looked like were already being remembered as if in a fog. While the girl was going through Leonhardt's letters in her hands, she did not notice how the door suddenly opened and Auntie appeared on the threshold. She did not even deign to knock. It was not in her rules. The woman also forgot to say hello. Right from the threshold, she ordered the girl to show her that she was hiding something in her golden purse. But Berta refused. This is her treasure, and they are not for prying eyes. Praise be to God! The evil woman turned her attention to the exquisite fur coat that the maid was holding. She immediately ran to the dress and tried to try it on herself, saying that it would suit her perfectly. But the maid said in a calm and confident tone that the fur coat was not intended for the Duchess. This is the Duke's gift to his young daughter, and probably Mr. Leonhardt would be against someone measuring Berta's clothes. Irina did not expect that they could treat her like that. How could a maid speak to her in such a tone? She is not going to steal this fur coat, even though she wanted it too much. I just decided to touch it with my hands. The maid saw how the girl reacted to the behavior of this rude and malicious woman. Therefore, they decided to calm the baby in any way possible, brought her a delicious time and sweets, as well as a lot of toys. And the girl decided to protect the poor maids, whom the vicar scolded for nothing. Therefore, she asked the woman to behave as the guests of the Aslan family liked. It is not customary to be rude to servants here. The woman's face instantly twisted. She was humiliated by this little girl, even in front of the servants. If they weren't here, this little rat would get a good pat on the back of the head. It's a pity that she can't do this in front of people. The poor maids became uncomfortable, and they asked Berta not to swear with her aunt because of them, but the girl had a completely different opinion. Then she asked them to leave. She needs to talk to this traitor alone. Woman, I didn't understand much about the behavior of this nasty little girl. She still did not understand why all the servants and the Duke, including the girl, called the girl by the name of Bertha. Who gave her this terrible name? While the vicar was in thought, the maids managed to leave the room, and she was left alone with her niece. Surprisingly, the little girl was not scared, but asked what the aunt wanted to tell her. The relative demonstratively sat down on the sofa and said that the niece was behaving in an unpleasant manner. She completely forgot what education and good manners are. This is all because she left the capital. The woman continued to play her game. She said that she heard the girl being called by her name. She also liked it very much, and she thinks that it is perfect for her niece. Farina decided to tell the little girl that there is one very interesting tradition in the north. Here, people think that the name is very important, so they do not give it to unwanted children, and Bertie is an unwanted child. That is why she did not have a name until the age of 8, and the Duke knew this very well, but even now he does not start a conversation about it. The woman pretended that she was very sorry, and she sympathized with the baby. And then the evil deceiver began to hit the weakest point. She said that for the sake of her late sister, she asked the Duke to give her a name, but he refused and asked the vicar not to raise this question anymore. Farina reveled in what she had done to the little girl, but she remained calm and listened attentively to the nonsense that this liar was talking about. Aunt's words were very different from what she heard here. She remembers perfectly the day when she overheard the conversation of her father and his assistant in the office. He said that he spent many days choosing a name for his baby. I wonder why this woman came to the north and why she is lying to her so openly now. Apparently, he wants to spoil Berta's relationship with the Duke. And the little girl tried so hard to finally fix everything and draw her father's attention to her. Even in the capital, the vicar did not forget to remind Balochka every day that her father had completely forgotten about her, that he did not want to see her because he did not love her at all. He did not want a child from her late sister. She has heard these words that bring tears to her eyes 1,000 times. But now, for some reason, her aunt's repertoire did not touch her at all. She remained calm. Arriving in the north, she realized that she could only trust herself and her feelings. As a child, she could not say anything to her father about how much the Vicomtesse Farina hated her. She was too young, and her father was too far away. But he lived his life twice. The picture became absolutely clear. Woman sinful, in fact. I thought that I had offended the girl to the core because she stood and was silent, but the vicar did not understand that Balochka had long since become the second. She will no longer be offended. The deceiver hoped that she had done everything right, and the baby would again hide in a corner and silently obey all her orders and suffer humiliation. It has always been so, and it must remain so. And Bertie looked at her aunt and understood that she had been deceiving her all this time. Even in her past life, her words about her father not loving her took root in the girl's heart. But now she understands that all this is not true. But now she doesn't have the strength to fight this powerful and cunning woman. What can Bertie do to her without money and a roof over her head? Revenge for everything, both of them won't work yet. We need to deal with what is important now. And now it is important to stay in the Duke's castle as long as possible. She agreed with the Duke that she would stay in the north before the onset of winter, but she needs a little more time, namely until she comes of age. She urgently needs to come up with something else to convince her father to leave her here longer. She needs to be needed, and finding a tuberose is not enough for that. Something else is needed. Therefore, the girl went straight to the Duke's library. There are many books. She will definitely find something useful in them that will give her a way out of the current situation. Not a minute can be lost. In the morning, the maid entered the room to wake up the baby for breakfast, but was very surprised Bertie was sitting at the table among the stacks of books and writing something down. She was very focused. Finally, the baby got up from the table. A smile played on her face. It seemed that she was completely satisfied with herself. She held several written letters in her hands and was about to take them to Duke Leonhardt. One of the maids felt sorry for the poor girl. She probably wrote all night and didn't even go to bed. Therefore, the governess suggested that Berta sleep a little while. She herself would take the letter to the Duke and hand it over to him personally. At breakfast, Carlis studied his sister intently. It seemed to him that she had changed a lot in recent days, had grown up or something, but today she looked very tired and too calm. But when the guy asked what happened to her, she calmly answered that she hadn't slept all night. The brother was surprised. Just one night without sleep, and she already looks like a squeezed lemon. Is Tails really such a weakling? But the girl was exhausted and wanted to sleep so much that she even decided not to react to her brother's jokes in her direction. Let him joke. He doesn't do it out of malice. She already understood it. Therefore, it was pointless to retort. But Carlis decided to stop making fun of the little girl and help her. He said that all of Aslan's family is very strong and hardy. Therefore, the girl should not be particularly different. She needs to try, maybe even train to be perfect. Meanwhile, the maid took Bertha's letter to Duke Leonhardt's office. Tot was slightly surprised but still accepted the message. The girl reported that the baby did not sleep all night, read something in books, and wrote it down. The man frowned. He also asked his daughter to monitor her health, take care of her condition. She must be very tired if she didn't sleep all night, so it won't hurt for long. Maids need to keep a closer eye on Balochka. Even at a glance, it was clear that the girl was in a hurry and did a lot of work, as the handwriting was imprecise. According to what Berta wrote, a huge disaster must happen soon. The Duke called his assistant Pages and informed him of the news. It turned out that this catastrophe cannot be prevented or avoided. Human forces here are too weak, and there are very few of them. Since there was too little time left before trouble, it was necessary to act as soon as possible. Therefore, Leonhardt ordered to gather everyone in his office, including the servants. They should listen to Balochka. By noon, all the inhabitants of the castle were in the Duke's office. The man asked his little daughter if what was written in her calculations was true, because this is a very serious matter. The girl looked at everyone at the table and said that her calculations were correct. This is a future forecast, from which it is clear that the climate on the continent will change radically, and then a real disaster will occur for all residents. It was clear from the look of the manager that he does not believe and thinks that the girl is just making up fairy tales. This is just a forecast, and forecasts, as everyone knows, often do not come true. Besides, where does the child have such information? The girl foresaw that many people would have questions, so she prepared well to answer everything as clearly as possible. She saw this catastrophe with her own eyes in a past life, but Bertie will keep silent about this. Malishka opened the records and showed everyone the information that such disasters periodically happened on the continent. And ancient scientists wrote about this. They also warned that everything would happen again. In the memoirs of eyewitnesses, it was said that the continent was engulfed in icy cold. All living things froze from terrible frosts. The waters dried up, and all the plants simply froze in the icy wind. People were not ready for such changes in nature, so they were awaited by terrible cold and, of course, hunger. Many people died then simply because they ran out of food supplies. Count Gelot intervened in the conversation again. He looked at all this skeptically and said that trusting the stories of some ancient travelers is quite stupid. It is necessary to rely on confirmed facts. The manager continued, "A little girl cannot fully understand the situation with climate change. In addition, it is necessary to check the sources from which she read this information. Perhaps this is a collection of children's fairy tales." But Berta was fully prepared for such a turn of events. She brought a stack of books to the table and offered to study the climatic studies of the scientists of the kingdom of Astrum together. These men are adults and educated. Unlike her, everyone present in the office began to look at the scientific records and were extremely surprised that Berta managed to find them and systematize all the information about climate change over hundreds of years. Everyone has read that when a blue star rises in the sky, famine and destruction come on the earth. If the Little Ice Age occurs approximately every 200 years, and the last case was in 4860, then a new one will begin very soon. Blue stars are very beautiful and attract the eyes of lovers of aesthetics. They are like a blessing from heaven, but in fact, such celestial lights portend a terrible disaster that awaits humanity. In the years when blue stars are observed rising in the sky, rains occur less and less often. A terrible drought is coming, even grass and moss stop growing. This, in turn, causes a shortage of products. Then comes the coldest winter, which lasts a very long time. And that's when humanity's struggle with great hunger begins. It is worth thinking about in order to prevent an approaching disaster. The Duke's advisors assumed that it is possible to prepare many times more food and survive the hungry times. But Berta reminded that in addition to hunger, the continent will suffer from long winter colds. Of course, in order to survive a terrible winter, the first thing you need to do is to stock up on a large amount of food as well as firewood. This is the only way to avoid terrible hunger and stay alive. That was Berta's plan for the continent. As a strategic product, the girl offers to take tuberose. They themselves are able to grow this plant and collect its tubers. Therefore, it makes no sense, as before, to buy and bring supplies from other kingdoms. One of the advisors suggested using this plant more actively. It is necessary to find large plots of land suitable for cultivation and grow tuberose there on an industrial scale. Then cold winter and hunger are not scary for them. Bertha looked at those present. Well, the beginning has been made. She has laid out the main part of the information, but the girl was sure that many of the advisors, including the managing zealot, would be against her plan. She remembered that even before her rebirth, her idea to save the continent was rejected several times because of the high risk. Then, some estates were completely destroyed, and they had to be rebuilt from scratch. Therefore, this time the squirrel had to make every effort to convince absolutely everyone of the effectiveness of his plan. After all, they still need to organize free canteens for the poor. Count Gelot was the first to object to such an idea. Caring for the people is definitely touching, but such sympathy will lead to the fact that common people will begin to be lazy, who then will work for the good of the country. The girl smiled slyly in response. She said that this is exactly how it should be done. When trouble comes, it is necessary to give alms to the beggars, and the Count is probably worried about the fact that he will not get any benefit for himself for giving out free food. Bertie looked at the man and said that there are people in the north who do good deeds simply from the heart, and there are those who do not know mercy, and, on the contrary, try to use this compassion to earn money. At that moment, the girl realized that it was not for nothing that she read many books about how to influence people. Now, this information is very useful to her. The technique of persuasion worked 100%, and they began to listen to her. Therefore, the girl leaned over to the Duke and asked him not to worry. In public canteens, no one is going to hand out food for free. People will have to earn it. In addition, people will try a variety of dishes made from tuberosum and tell their relatives and friends that the plant is not poisonous at all if it is prepared correctly. In this way, the inhabitants of the villages themselves will begin to grow this plant. All the Duke's advisors were stunned by the idea of a little girl. Grown men would never think of such a thing. And this little girl has developed a whole strategy to save not only the North, but also the whole continent. This is a really good idea. Using such a plan, it was possible to expect that tuberose would soon be on the tables of all residents of the country. Well, the managers objected that it would be extremely difficult to give people all the recipes, the main ingredient of which would be tuberose. The ruling zealot understood that this little girl was the Duke's daughter, which is why he did not dare to enter into an open discussion with the girl. But still, I guessed out loud that the profit from this business is not too optimistic. Information will be a profit for them. In the free canteens for visitors, they will collect various information from different corners of the North, and if necessary, on the contrary, they will transmit the necessary information for distribution. The Duke was amazed at the intelligence and foresight of his little daughter. Indeed, information could be the most powerful tool, and he was convinced of this himself many times. How proud he was of his baby. But not only Duke Leonhardt was amazed, all the advisors present were slightly surprised. After all, everything lies on the surface, but none of them could think of such an effective solution to the problem. But there is one more nuance that should be mentioned. Unlike the last time, when it was necessary to prepare for a famine, now the budget should be directed to domestic policy. The Duke nodded. He fully supported his daughter. While the war was going on, most of the budget was spent on it, but now the need to spend money on weapons has disappeared. Therefore, additional resources appeared. The Minister of Finance confirmed the Duke's words. The economic situation has really improved. The financial situation is quite calm, so you cannot worry about it. The minister also added that now there is money to fill the barns in the castle to the brim and help ordinary residents of the capital and other cities with food. And Berta mentally exhaled. Everything was resolved successfully. The girl thought a little and decided not to tell more information. She will save her biggest trump card for the second occasion. In the meantime, it will provide an opportunity for adults to further manage the situation. After a long and tense meeting, Berta decided to go out into the garden and take a little walk. She is terribly tired of proving herself right to grown men, therefore, it is necessary to take a break and breathe fresh air. Although the girl was tired, her mood was especially high. For such deeds, she will most likely be allowed to live in the ducal castle, and for the sake of it, it was worth staying awake for several nights. The girl was so deep in her dreams that she didn't even notice how a horseman rode up to her at great speed and picked her up in his arms like lightning. It was Carlos, and he really scared the little girl. The guy said that he would like to go for a walk with his sister to an interesting place, but Berta's fright made her think that she could only take a walk to heaven, and then she would be able to be reborn a third time. They raced at such a speed that the girl could not even breathe normally. Not that she would ask her brother to slow down his horse a little. She had never experienced extremes in her life. The guy did not understand what the squirrel was squealing about. It seemed to him that she was making sounds of delight from a fast horse ride. Therefore, he began to drive the horse even faster so that his sister would get maximum pleasure. When they stopped, Bertie jumped off her horse like lightning, and then she stood on the ground with her hands and feet. She needed to feel the ground beneath her and make sure she was still alive. She felt unimportant, to say the least. The young Duke began to joke. He did not understand that such an interesting girl was looking for in the frozen grass. Therefore, the guy asked her to stand up because everything around is much more interesting. With great difficulty, Bertha forced herself to rise from the earth and looked around. In front of her stretched a large, beautiful lake. It was difficult to look away from him, so the little girl froze in amazement for a while. Carlos took the squirrel by the hand and led it closer to the water. They saw their own reflections in her. The guy said that this is Lake Aslan, and that not only mountains are beautiful in the north. The guy from Tishka looked at the little girl and asked to understand if she liked this place. Apparently, the girl was mesmerized by the local beauty. She could not admire nature by and large. The trip benefited her. Bertie really liked the place. She told her brother that she was grateful for such a trip. She managed to change the situation and relax a little after the meeting in the Duke's office, but she will never sit on a horse again in her life. The brother looked at her with surprise. What is this little girl saying? She is the Duke's daughter and must know how to drive a horse the best, but Berta looked the guy in the eyes and said that she simply does not know how to ride a horse. Carlos was not surprised. It seemed that he even got a little angry. This baby is already 8 years old. How can she not know how to ride a horse? And how will she then go hunting? Maybe on a pony? But the squirrel was not one of the top 10. She decided to answer her brother. Perhaps she is not so good at riding, but she knows how to quickly pick berries and fruits and is excellent at climbing trees. Carlos looked at the baby with some disappointment. During this time, he managed to fall in love with his fluffy little sister. But all the same, although she is cute, she is very similar to an ice floes. He really wanted to help the girl. The young Duke asked the squirrel how she was going to survive in this harsh northern region. To live here, you need to have certain skills and, of course, very good health. Not everyone can adapt to the cold here. The girl saw that the young Duke was slightly upset and asked why Tot took out a miniature bow and arrows from his bag. It was a gift for the squirrel in case she wants to hunt in the forest, but they always hunt on horseback. Bertha decided not to disappoint her brother. He really tried to please her. Therefore, the girl said that she would like to train, learn to ride a horse and shoot a bow. A bright smile shone on Carlos's face. The brother boasted that he was considered the best archer in the north. Therefore, he is ready to help the squirrel learn everything that he knows himself. At any convenient moment for the squirrel, he can give her several lessons. It was not often that Berta managed to see her brother in such an uplifted mood. He just changed before our eyes. I wish my brother would always remain so cheerful and good-natured. It is probably necessary to question the ego more often about martial arts. They were both so excited by the conversation that they heard a strange hiss behind them, and only when Berta raised her eyes did she see a huge, scary snake behind her brother. The girl just had time to shout to Carlisa about the danger from behind. Carlos reacted instantly. He took out his sword, and without wasting a second of time, began to cut down the vile, huge snake. There was not a drop of fear in his eyes, just that their color became an even more intense yellow. After a few minutes, which Bertie spent with her eyes closed and her whole body trembling, everything instantly quieted down. You could no longer hear the terrible hissing. When he opened his eyes, the squirrel realized that Carlos had defeated the snake. A minute later, the brother ran up to the little girl and carefully examined her. He was excited, asked if everything was okay with Berta, because she is afraid of blood, but everything was fine with the baby. At that moment, Berta realized that she was very worried about Carlos. She ran close to him and hugged him tightly. The little girl was very afraid that the snake would just eat her brother. The boy had not felt such a rush of tender feelings for a long time. He smiled and tried to calm the squirrel. He said that it was easy and simple to defeat the snake. He is even a little disappointed that his opponent was so weak. The Duke crouched down a little to be on the level with the little girl and asked her not to be afraid of anything. While he is next to her, absolutely nothing threatens her. He will destroy all her enemies, big and small. Brother and sister went to a beautiful, large clearing. There was a lot of space and light here. It was possible to relax and even take a little nap. Squirrel thought that it would be nice to take a breath and calm down. For some reason, she remembered a boy whom she met in the middle of the forest and who helped her a lot. He was very tight-lipped, but definitely kind to her. Verdi did not understand then where he had disappeared to. While the girl was thinking about the past, Carlos had already prepared a warm blanket and laid it on the grass. It was possible to lie down and even sleep a little. The brother demonstrated his care for the baby with all his might. The brother even covered the baby to keep her warm, and Bertie was extremely grateful to him for that. She immediately began to drift off to sleep. The day turned out to be the same. It would be nice to even sleep for a few hours. Carlos himself noticed that the baby gets up very quickly. Maybe it's because of her age. Plus, it is very miniature. Therefore, the boy tried to do everything possible to restore his sister's strength. The young Duke leaned over the squirrel and even tried to sing something like a lullaby for her. Bertha could not believe that her brother had made such a journey just to be with her for a little while and help her relax and calm down. There were many rumors about Aslanov's strict discipline on the continent. Some people said that lions throw their children off a cliff. They also said that only the strongest leave offspring. People certainly believed in these fables. In fact, no one abandoned their children anywhere, but their parents sent them to battle. At the age when other children play with wooden weapons, the descendants of the Aslan clan already went to the battlefield with real swords. The North was a very harsh land. Therefore, those who were lucky enough to be born here were much stronger than other generations. All the inhabitants of the North, from the children to the Starikovs, understood and accepted this order of things. Fortunately or not, the fate of Carlos Aslan was not so bad. Enemies trembled with fear at his sight. The servants were constantly afraid of him. There was always such an attitude towards strong people here. They were feared and respected. The cruel, cold Sever did not exclude absolutely anyone. The children of dukes differed little from commoners because they were all tested by war. But then this cute red-haired girl appeared, and everything changed. Carlos perfectly understood the impression he made on others. Ego was feared by absolutely everything, but not just a little squirrel. She looked at her brother with wide-open eyes and did not even think to look away. The young Duke watched his younger sister sleep peacefully. He did not leave her for a minute, and now the squirrel woke up. Her stomach rumbled with hunger, and Carlos had to solve this problem. It turned out that her brother is not only brave, but also very prudent. He knew that they would be in the forest for a long time, so he took delicious milk chocolate with him. Now this delicacy came in very handy. The girl did not notice that there was only one piece left of the entire bar of chocolate, and only then she remembered that her brother had also not eaten anything since morning. She became very ashamed, and Berta handed the remnants of the delicacy to the boy. Tot smiled and politely refused the chocolate Carlos also wanted to eat terribly. But girl, he had a hearty breakfast in the morning. Therefore, it will last until dinner without any problems, and they will already be at home for dinner. So there are no problems. Bertha again remembered the stranger she met in the forest. Then the guy also offered her a delicious cookie, but she, either because of hunger or because of greed, also did not share it. Now history is repeating itself. On the road, Berta saw a growing tuberose. Well, the girl wanted to treat her brother to something more delicious, and after walking a few meters, the girl saw a huge walnut tree. Without thinking for a long time, Birdie decided to turn into a squirrel. In this way, she will be able to quickly climb a tree, collect delicious nuts, and treat the Duke with them. This solution seemed ideal to her, so the next minute her outfit was already lying on the ground. Everything happened so quickly that Carlos didn't even have time to figure out where the little girl had run to and what she was going to do. And after a few minutes, the squirrel put a kissable handful of fine nuts in the boy's hands. Carlos even felt a certain awkwardness. This little fluffy baby made an effort just for him. It was very pleasant and somewhat embarrassing. That's why the guy's cheeks turned a little red. It was so cute that Carlos could barely hold back the tears that came to his eyes. He bowed and sincerely thanked Baloshka. He will probably keep these nuts as a souvenir. The guy smiled and took the baby by the fluffy, soft cheeks. She is so cute. How good it is that he has a younger sister. This girl melted a whole block of ice in his cold heart. The Duke did it exclusively out of gentle good motives, but Berta was not used to trusting people, so she looked askance at the guy. Maybe he wants to lull her vigilance with such actions. Carlos saw that the little girl was very angry, but he could not help himself. Ego's hands reached out to touch the little squirrel. He finally has the opportunity to care for someone. On the battlefield, he saw countless enemies dying in terrible agony, but this fact did not affect the guy before, but now he has become somewhat overly sentimental. Carlos is also not used to the fact that someone can take care of him. His whole life was connected with the war, and then this cute, fluffy creature appears and turns everything upside down. And the young Duke also realized that what he feels for this girl is not just sympathy or affection. He now knows exactly what this feeling is. Carlos just loves his little sister. The guy could tell that Balochka also has warm feelings for him, even though she tries to seem like a little badass. He bent even lower and told the little girl that he would never leave her. Brother and sister returned home towards evening. There was general bustle in the castle. When asked what happened, the maid replied that the Duke was waiting for a very important guest, so everyone was preparing for his arrival. The girl thought that this is indeed a very important person, since he is not received in the same way as the vicar, Farina. So the Duke still has friends, or some good relatives whom the girl does not know. Probably Bertie would be better off hiding somewhere further away until the guest leaves the castle walls. Father will be embarrassed to introduce her to strangers. He will be ashamed that he has such a child. All her short life she remained an outcast. Before the resurrection of the girl, the Duke never once invited her to his castle, and now he is persistently trying to bring her back to the capital. The girl was so lost in thought, wandering through the winter garden alone, that she did not immediately see that her aunt, the vicar, Farina, was waiting for her at the end of the alley. An evil smile played on her face, and this did not please the girl. Bertie felt that this meeting was not accidental, so she directly asked the woman why she was looking for her. The aunt, with the same mischievous smile, said that she really wanted to introduce the baby to one of her acquaintances. Then the woman looked around and called her wolves to her. According to Farina, they should meet one runaway rat, and apparently this rat was precisely Squirrel. The girl perfectly remembered how her aunt used to set these dogs on her in the capital, and it was terrible. Bertie froze in place and began to tremble all over. History repeats itself. Now these creatures will start biting her. Farina observed the situation and laughed, so she took revenge on Baloshka for her disgrace in the presence of the servants, and now the dogs need to sniff out the harmful baby to find her if she wants to run away again. The dogs began to slowly approach the girl, and she, in turn, began to shout that they should not touch her. The situation seemed simply hopeless, and Berta tightly closed her eyes from fear. But something strange happened here. Suddenly the dogs fell silent, and then began to howl mournfully. When the little girl opened her eyes, she saw in front of her the same stranger whom she met recently in the forest. No matter how hard the vicar tried, she failed to bring her dogs back into the attack. They ran to her feet with a guilty and frightened look and began to whimper and tremble with terror. The guy turned to Berta and calmly informed that there was no more danger. She can calm down and continue walking. He then asked why she was afraid of dogs, and the little girl could not utter a word of surprise. And in the next moment, Carlos appeared out of nowhere and stood between Berta and the stranger. The Duke shouted that he should not dare to approach his sister. Bertie understood that these two knew each other. As it turned out later, this stranger was the important guest who was waiting for Leonhardt's castle. The Duke himself went to the threshold to meet the man. Seeing that Carlis was holding the guest on the threshold, Leonhardt invited him inside. The Duke of the North immediately understood that there was some tension between the young people, but he could not understand the reason why Carlis is angry, and nervously looks at the guest. Leonhardt decided to understand the situation. Carlis replied maliciously that he was not going to fulfill the role of servant and personal guide. Besides, he will not tolerate it if a guest molests his sister. If he is a guest, let him behave accordingly. Leonhardt looked at the guest in such a way that he felt uneasy. Even in the most terrible battle, the guy did not feel death so close. He was even afraid to raise his eyes and looked at the Duke. But he was silent for a second. The stranger decided to explain himself. He said that there was a misunderstanding. He did not want to molest Balachka, but only decided to help her because the woman let the dogs down on the little girl. And the guy pointed his finger at Farina standing nearby. Herzog is used to dealing with problems quickly. Therefore, he immediately asked the matron if their guest was telling the truth. The woman started to wriggle out, but it didn't turn out well for her. Probably this woman is simply bored with life, or she is looking for a quick death, so Leonhardt can arrange it for her right now. But then the man changed his mind and ordered the guards to immediately expel the relative from the castle. Farina could not calm down and kept trying to justify herself. She shouted that she did not plan to scare the girl. She thought that Balachka really likes puppies. She called her bloodthirsty chain dogs puppies. The Duke thought to himself that his poor daughter must have had a hard time in the house of the vicar. She suffered bullying, but he will stop it. How could he entrust a child to such a terrible woman? This is the second time in a week that a girl has to thank a stranger for saving her life. He always appears at the right moment. Probably, he is her guardian angel. Suddenly, father and brother stood in front of Balachka. They blocked the boy's access to the girl. Then the Duke, in an icy voice, ordered the guest to take 10 steps away from the girl, and Carlis decided that it would be better to move away for 30. The girl felt very sorry for her savior. He is a guest, so why are they shouting at him like that? In addition, he saved her from dogs, and even earlier from starvation in the forest, and now they are not even allowed to stand next to Berta. Then the girl suddenly heard her stranger being called a prince. Here is the news. And what kind of country is that prince? And if he has such a title, then why does his father not allow him to approach Berta? There were only 2 princes in their kingdom. She knew one of them very well, the traitor Ritter, but he had an older half-brother, whom the girl had never seen. If you put everything into one whole and include logic, it was not difficult to guess that the mysterious stranger is the same half-brother of Ritter. This is a surprise. Such a turn of events could not but please the girl. This boy is the first prince, the one whom Ritter so despises and hates. That is, the enemy of her enemy, who is her friend. And then an amazing idea came to the baby's head. It is a sin not to take advantage of such an acquaintance. If they form an alliance with the prince, they will be able to defeat Ritter with one blow. This is a great way to take revenge. The stranger continued to feel the evil glances of the Duke and his son. He expected that they would not be happy for him in the north, but he presented it in a slightly different way. Carlis even threatened to kill him. As the first prince, he had to come to the north to express his gratitude to Duke Aslan for his military exploits, and also the guy had to convey congratulations on behalf of the entire royal family, but it was considered stupid to come to Sèvres with empty hands. Therefore, the boy gave the Duke a whole chest of gold as a present. After all, a considerable amount of money was spent on wars. But the Duke, in turn, decided to thank the first prince. As it turned out, this Smelchak and his army came to help right on the battlefield and provided quite a lot of help during the war. Now Berta understood how these two knew each other. Together they fought bravely on the battlefield against the enemy, and as it turned out, the first prince was also a very brave warrior. The king ordered his son to go to the north and stay there until the Duke, in turn, thanked the first prince for his help in the battle. And this was a great humiliation for the guy. After this concession of the king, the boy clearly decided for himself that his father hated him. For some reason, he did not send his favorite Ritter to the north. All the dirty and humiliating work in the kingdom has to be done by him. But In the end, the guy was happy that he got to the north. He did not expect that he would meet a squirrel in this region. After all, according to his information, she should have been in the capital with her aunt. And since it turned out that way, he will try to make it so that he can spend as much time as possible with this fluffy baby. And by the way, now is just the right time for Bert to visit, and the poor squirrel was tossing and turning in bed from the excess of emotions and impressed by today's day, and could not fall asleep in any way. She was overwhelmed by hundreds of thoughts: why the first principal appeared in the north, and why Carlos hates him so much. The next moment, the girl heard strange sounds on the street. Someone called her a star and asked her to go out on the balcony. Curiosity won, and she decided to see who would call her late in the evening. The birth of the first prince of Artel was not blessed. The reason was that the boy was born an anamorph dragon. That is, he was a being capable of turning from a human into an animal and vice versa. Even in unions between two anamorphs, dragons were born very rarely. But some kind of magic happened here, and instead of a snake, a dragon was born to the king. It was strange and embarrassing at the same time. Mother Koroleva initially disliked the boy. She was waiting for the wise and cunning snake, and in the end the higher forces ordered her, and a dragon was born to her. Therefore, the boy never knew what real motherly love is. In addition to the fact that the boy had bright yellow eyes, which is not characteristic of their kind, he also had black hair. All other children had white hair. Therefore, the boy was an outcast from childhood. Artel was hated simply for what he is. The king and queen asked the child not to even look at them because it terribly annoyed the parents. Therefore, the boy once again tried not to show himself in public and spent most of his time in his room studying. Parents were most annoyed by their son's bright yellow eyes. In order to forever avoid the child's gaze, the king ordered him to wear a black armband and thereby forever protect himself from the piercing gaze of the child. But the boy was still small and often obeyed the king's orders. He could not stay in a bandage for a long time. Besides, he wanted to know and study the world around him. He was always scolded for listening. Did the king not believe the rumors? The darker the anamorph's eye color, the more power it has. But because of the energy radiating from the eyes of his eldest son, he was losing his personal authority, and this terribly pissed off the ego. Unlike Artel, Ritter was a real favorite of the royal family. His mother adored him. His father was proud of him. The servant carried him in her arms. The boy grew up spoiled and very mean. Father, mother, and even all the servants in the palace panicked at the sight of Artel, and little Ritter was generally asked to remove his brother. The boy must not look the elder prince in the eye. Over time, the boy got used to the bandage and was even happy to wear it. Only in this form were those around him not afraid of him. They talked to him, and even some servants felt a little sorry for him, but only not the parents. That demonstrative ego was despised. Time passed. The boy grew up. He wanted more and more to find a person in this world who could look into his yellow eyes without fear. He felt an acute need for this. At moments when Artel's heart was particularly heavy, he turned into a dragon and circled over the garden. Only in heaven he felt free and could remain himself. No one could see his eyes from such a height. It was very sad, lonely, and uncomfortable in the royal palace, and when the guy soared high in the sky, it was possible to forget about everything for a while, especially about the terrible fate of his parents. The advantage of the amorphous dragon was that it could hide in thick clouds and fly freely unnoticed by people. No one saw him, but he could see absolutely everything that was happening on the streets of the capital. Once, cast very low above the houses, the Artel saw an open window, and in it a small, pretty girl with red hair. She was sad. The baby was very lightly dressed and could catch a cold. Artel thought that it would be a good idea to disperse the strong wind with his wings, and thus drive the girl inside the room, away from the window. But the girl turned out to be too curious. The guy was so engrossed that he did not realize how he flew too quickly to the window. Then he heard the girl address him and call him Mr. Star. Probably she confused the guy's yellow eyes with stars. The girl began to smile, and this could not but please the dragon. The little girl asked him to come down even closer. said that he had very beautiful eyes, and she desperately wanted to see them better. They shine like stars. At that moment, the dragon wanted to cry from happiness. For the first time in his life, someone paid attention to his eyes and said that they were very beautiful. Did this little creature see something good in him? For the first time in his life, the guy heard kind words in his direction. For the first time, they did not run away from him, but on the contrary, asked him to come closer. And these were not parents or a brother, but a completely foreign person to him. The prince decided to approach the window, just in case. He asked the girl if she was afraid of him, since he looked a little strange, but she replied that he is very cute, and she is not afraid in the slightest. The guy gathered his spirit and decided to ask the girl about something. He would be very pleased if the baby would allow him to be called a star. After all, in his eyes, she constantly shines brightly. The baby was a little surprised. After all, she came up with the idea of calling the dragon a star, and now he is asking for the same, so how will they decide? If they are both asterisks, there will be confusion. The guy was a little embarrassed. Indeed, it turns out strange. He did not even think about it. After a minute, the thoughtful dragon asked to be called by his name, that is, Artel. And now, after a long time, he sees the girl again. Now she is not standing in the window opening, but she is standing on a beautiful balcony in her father's castle. He calls her a star and asks to be called Artel. But this time everything turned out not at all as expected by the naive prince. The baby screamed, began to call him a deceiver and a traitor. Why did he come to her at all? The guy was embarrassed, and for the first few minutes he didn't even know what to say. Then he reminded the squirrel that he was still the same dragon with whom she befriended. He simply could not come to her for a very long time. It turns out that even earlier, the little girl had asked Ritter about dragons in detail. She said that a strange dark cloud in the form of a dragon was approaching her, and very beautiful bright eyes. Bertha also told the prince that they have a lot in common with the dragon. The boy looked away, thought a little, and said that it is he who visits her at night in the form of a dragon. He even came up with an elaborate story that the strange cloud is a magical disguise. If he had wandered around in the form of a snake, everyone would have guessed that he was the king's son Ritter. Then the girl was happy to hear these words from the prince. He is so wonderful and always tries to surprise her. The trick with the dragon is very interesting. It turns out that Ritter has a wonderful imagination. Every day, the prince methodically repeated the little words he said that he was Berta's only friend, and at the same time her future husband. And the little girl blindly believed his words. And now, standing alone on the balcony, Bertha was angry because she thought that it was Ritter who had come to her. She wanted to see someone, but this vile deceiver least of all. She once again told the dragon to clean up properly, otherwise she will be forced to call her father and brother into the room, and then the prince will definitely not say hello. In the best case, he will remain without wings. Finally, the Artel understood why the girl was so angry. She thinks that her younger brother Ritter is chasing her, and how will he convince her that it's not him? The task does not seem to be simple. The guy decided to play openly and not hide anything. Therefore, he asked the girl to listen to him. He is not who she thinks he is. Ritter is far from here in the capital. He would definitely be afraid to fly here. Hearing such words, the girl was very surprised. She stopped and turned back to the dragon. Is he telling the truth? Probably yes. Ritter is really very timid. He would not dare to appear in the north. Earlier, she read in books that an antimorph is a dragon that can communicate with people even in the form of a monster, but he behaves in a completely different way than she behaves in the form of a squirrel. Why did Ritter lie to her when she told him about the dragon's visits? He is an unimaginably mean guy, and he definitely had good reasons to deceive the girl, but now it is worth finding out which ones. The dragon exhaled a little and gradually calmed down. He will not lose his beloved star. Now they are in the north, and it was here that she received the name Bertha. It's going crazy. Next, the little girl asked a question. As it happened, the dragon also ended up in the north. What is he doing here? After all, he used to live in the capital. There may be a catch here as well. Antimorph answered that he had arrived in the north to Duke Aslan with the first prince. He is his assistant. Therefore, they will be able to meet with the star in the evenings since it is problematic to do this during the day. The squirrel was a little upset that he would not be able to see his friend when it was light outside, but it didn't work out the other way. At least in the evenings she will enjoy the company of her pleasant creature. Bertha told the dragon that during the day she managed to see the first Prince Artel. He seemed to her a little arrogant and a little mysterious. Also, he is very worried about his reputation. The baby continued to share her impressions with the dragon. Hey, it seemed that this guy looked a little like Playboy. He looks simply amazing and attracts everyone's attention. She was no exception. And the girl also admitted that at the first meeting, the Artel called her lady, and she really liked it. It turned out that in addition to everything else, he is also polite. This prince does not look like Ritter at all. They chatted a little more, and the dragon noticed that the girl was falling asleep. She is very tired for today. He knows it very well. Therefore, the dragon said that he urgently needed to fly, wished the little girl a good night, and hid. Artel had just flown away when an angry Carlos appeared on the threshold of her room. He went inside and looked around. It seemed that the Duke was looking for someone. Probably he decided that he would see the first prince of the kingdom here. To his surprise, the girl was alone and had been lying in bed for a long time. She asked her brother why he was still awake and why he came to her at such a time. He embarrassedly replied that he just came to wish the squirrel a good night. Carlos sat a little longer in the baby's bed. He stroked her fluffy hair and warned her that if she sees a guy with dark hair and yellow eyes, let her definitely ignore him. You should not talk to him. For herself, Berta could not understand why her brother was behaving so strangely. Maybe because he didn't care about it before. He was very worried that no one would harm this fluffy baby. The morning of the next day was just as noisy. All the servants bustled around the house. Berta inquired a little and found out that the Duke was preparing for a grand banquet in honor of the victory of his army. Indeed, how could she forget about such a holiday? Both the Duke and his army deserve to have a banquet in their honor and rejoice at the end of the long war. Will she be allowed to come? Knowing her father, she did not expect too much to receive an invitation to the victory celebration, but the maid said that there will be guests from the capital, so everything must be prepared in the highest order. It turned out that before the war, Duke Leonhard also organized a grandiose ball. Guests from the capital were also present there. They criticized the event and called it rustic. And then Balachka was handed a beautiful envelope containing an invitation to a tea party. Did she wait for the Duke to introduce her to the guests as his own daughter? And Carlos will tell everyone that she is his sister. Only after a minute and carefully read the text of the letter, the little girl realized that Prince Artel was inviting her to a cup of tea. They will drink tea only together, and it is too exciting. Bertha decided to accept the invitation and went to meet the prince. But as soon as she entered the living room, Carlos immediately ran up to her. His face expressed clear displeasure. Artel reminded that he invited only a young lady. The young Duke shouted that it is not customary to drink tea here, and he strongly asks not to call him the lady's sister, but best of all, if the prince does not talk to her at all, so everyone will be calmer. Artel smiled mysteriously and said that even during the war, Carlos was not so sensitive. He changed a lot after returning from the battlefield, and, by the way, the prince never approached the lady first. But the Duke was unapproachable in his desire to protect his tail from this terrible type. Yes, the prince is certainly very handsome, but let the maids admire this beauty, not his fluffy sister. The prince smiled again. He did not want to develop a conflict. Therefore, he said that he named the girl that way simply out of a pure heart. After all, he has no one, and he would also like to have a sister like Carlos. Bertha thought, and what about his younger brother Ritter? Is the prince not on good terms with his relatives? Because he says that he has no one, but after all, the king and queen are alive. They live beautifully in the royal palace. What is happening? But on the other hand, it is even good. If he does not get along with his brother, then they may unite and oppose Ritter. Then the truth will prevail, and the traitors will be exposed. Carlos was terribly angry with his sister. He also asked to ignore this type, but the little girl said that she could not do that with His Highness. After all, he can help her carry out her revenge plan. Artel sat and listened to the Duke's grumbling, but tried not to react to him in any way. He had completely different plans. He approached the girl and asked permission to kiss her little hand. Berta suddenly thought that her brother might just burst out of anger. He turned red as a tomato and clenched his fists. Well, why do these men always want to resolve the conflict with the help of force and screams? She decided to urgently intervene, otherwise these two abnormal people would definitely fight. She asked her brother to calm down a little and leave the prince alone, to which he only snapped but still walked away from the boy. Verte continued. She said that she would very much like to hear the real name of the first prince. After all, it was for this reason that he sent her an invitation letter. Now she is waiting for an answer. Carlos could barely contain himself. He looked menacingly at the prince and said that only a name was waiting for him. After that, the king's son must leave the house, otherwise he will not vouch for himself. The prince nodded, walked over to Berta and got down on one knee. He looked the girl in the eyes and said that his name was Artel Oaks Astrum. Then he took the baby's hand and gently stroked it. Bertha thought. This name was very familiar to her. She heard that the mother of the first prince was from the royal family of the eastern continent. Perhaps the prince got his name there, which is why it seems familiar to her. At this time, Duke Leonhardt again summoned the Vicaress Farina to his office. He needed to get something from the woman. She brought medicine for the child from the royal family. So why doesn't she give it to me? The woman confirmed that she really should give the Duke medicine for the baby. With him, her niece will not be weak every winter. This medicine was prepared for Berta by the royal physician himself. It was the elixir of His Highness the Second Prince, who possesses the power of an animorph. As is known, the snake of noble wisdom has the poison of revenge, from which you can make a healing potion. Leonhardt no longer trusted this vile deceiver. She doesn't do anything just like that. Therefore, the Duke asked what the vicar asked for in return, but she answered that she was doing it out of love for the squirrel and loyalty to the kingdom. Then Farina decided to bow out as quickly as possible so as not to talk too much. She wished the Duke luck, said that she would be glad if her niece could survive the local winter without any problems. Duke Leonhardt lowered his head and thought deeply, why does this woman show such concern for her niece? She hates her. The situation seems strange and slightly funny. If everything the vicar said was true, she would have given the elixir to the baby immediately upon arrival in the north. But the woman does this only after she is kicked out of the castle. Something is wrong here. Farina continued to lie meanly. She said that she had heard that it is necessary to wait for the night when the constellation of the snake shines for the medicine to work. Now, when this day has almost come, she gives the medicine. Be that as it may, the most important thing for the Duke was the health of his daughter, but he had to make sure the elixir will not harm the squirrel. But on the other hand, apart from royal medicine, they had no other. The Viscountess confirmed that the medicine had no side effects. She said that there will be no physical changes in the girl, but the woman simply kept silent about the friend. There will be changes, but of a completely different nature. The conversation continued in the living room. Verdi asked the prince why he still couldn't take the bandage off his face. I would so like to see his eyes. Even in the middle of the forest, he remains blindfolded. When the girl understood what was going on, she was very surprised. It turns out that the eyes of the animorph are terrifying to ordinary people. He can intimidate his enemies just by looking at them. Therefore, Artel took off his bandage only on the battlefield. And the little girl remembered that when Auntie set her dogs on her, the Artel dispersed them without any action. He simply took off the bandage and looked the chain dogs in the eyes. Young people walked around the castle. Servants bustled around. Bertha informed her brother and the prince that the Duke was preparing to organize a huge banquet in honor of the victory. This time they should not fall face down into the mud. Everything will be at the highest level. Suddenly, the girl thought she heard her aunt's voice. Bertie ran to the railing and looked down. Farina was standing in the middle of the guest room and talking with the maid. She complained to the man about the appeal of local people to her person. The Viscountess decided that everything in the north looks rustic. only because there is no normal housewife here. Well, there is no choice. She will have to take on this important role, and she will definitely handle it. She turned to the maid and in a commanding tone demanded to bring her a list of prepared banquets. But he apologized and said that there are no records of the Aslan family to outsiders, even if they are relatives. When the woman refused to show the records for the second time, Farina decided to hit her. She had already swung but did not have time to strike. Bertha stood in front of her and in the same commanding tone told her aunt to lower her hand. The Viscountess simply seethed with anger. How dare this little rat oppose her? The stupid niece imagined herself the mistress of this house, but she will not allow herself to be mocked anymore and will show everyone who she is. The woman decided that if she could not hit the maid, she would take all her anger out on her niece and beat her, but suddenly her gaze stopped at two young people. Behind her stood the young Duke and Prince Artel. These two, each in their own way, tried with all their might to protect Bertha. This was especially evident in the prince. At the sight of the girl, his gaze became simply unbearable. He could kill just by looking at a person. But for some reason, the guys decided not to interfere. The prince assumed that the squirrel was not so weak that he could not cope with such a ridiculous situation. So these two decided to just watch from the side. The evil vicar once again decided to teach the girl proper manners. She began to tell that Sever has a bad influence on the little girl, and she forgets about the manners she was taught in the capital. But Bertha did not even listen to these stupid words. The girl came even closer to the woman and asked who taught manners to the actress herself. After all, mocking a small child is very bad and does not correspond to cultural behavior at all. Even before the resurrection of Bertha, the aunt was obsessed with the culture of behavior, dignity, and elegance. Therefore, it was not at all difficult to embarrass her now. She will not tolerate a single stain on her aristocratic name.